in the stocks index, stumbling over my words here, that have the supply chains that extend into China. So that's actually very important to watch. But then again, it doesn't really seem that a ton of that is weighing on stocks at the moment. You're seeing the NASDAQ in positive territory right now. What's really important to note, though, is we do have some very low volume, and a lot of this is because of that holiday weekend that we have coming up. So we may just see a lot of this action really show up on Tuesday as opposed to today.
I have to cover some debt here. What's going on with U.S. Treasuries after all the issuance that's coming out?
That's right. Well, we are seeing a little bit of a bid for treasuries right now. A lot of this is coming out basically. It looks like we're going from auction to auction, seeing just how the demand works for auction. Now, a big kind of concern in the background, this is more of a long-term concern here as we have kind of the pandemic in China becoming more near-term concerns, is will the demand for treasuries as we auction more and more, we do have that record amount being auctioned right now, will that start to kind of weigh on treasuries as we see demand perhaps wane? And the answer to that is maybe not, as we see some of those kind of hedging costs. This gets into a little bit of the weeds here, but I'll try to simplify. When we see some of those hedging costs from foreign currencies, especially the hedging costs between the Japanese yen and the U.S. dollar, as we see that drop a little bit, that could actually unlock a new wave of demand for treasury. So we're kind of seeing that come out at the same time. Some good kind of symmetry, if you will, between the currency and bond markets right now, and not actually working in favor of the Treasury at the moment.
Yeah, great. That's a terrific, comprehensive description of what's going on, and it may be out of date shortly as President Trump comes out and gives a news conference, because you talk about headline risk. Who knows what we might get out of that? There may be some more movement ahead as a practical matter. Thank you so much to Kriti Gupta. She reports on cross-asset for the Bloomberg Live blog. And now it's time for a market check, and for that we go to Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much. And here's what's going on. David Weston. Stocks trading mixed right now. As Kriti mentioned, we've got the S&P little change. Lower now, down 0.1%, falling by 3 points. The Dow is down 104. That is a drop of 0.4%. But NASDAQ holding on to its gains, up 15, again, ahead of a long holiday weekend, up 0.2%. And worth pointing out that year-to-date, NASDAQ now showing a gain of just about 3.7%. Your 10-year up 4/32. The yield right now 0.65%. Gold is up 0.5%, $17.35 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude down 2.2%, below $34 a barrel, right around the 33 level now at down 74 cents, 33.18. Again, a drop there of 0.2%. After earnings, Nvidia up 3.1%. Hewlett Packard Enterprise down now by 10.5%. Last night it reported declining sales, also said it'll be cutting jobs and reducing executive pay. And Hertz is in a race for its survival, facing a deadline of today. In talks with a group of creditors, Hertz shares, they have plunged by just about 8%. Again, recapping, equities trading mixed with the S&P down 3, a drop right now of 0.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much, Charlie. This is Balance of Power I'm David Weston. Doctors around the world have problems sometimes in getting their patients to comply with their instructions. But what if the patient is the President of the United States, or for that matter, the Vice President of the United States? We welcome now Dr. Jennifer Pena. She's Medical Director for Virtual Primary Care at Oscar Medical Group. Dr. Pena earlier served as part of the White House Medical Unit, including as physician to Vice President Mike Pence. So, Doctor, thank you so much for joining us. I suppose everyone asks you this question, but I want to, too. What about the use of masks? We saw President Trump at a Ford plant again yesterday not wearing a mask. They said maybe he wore it behind the scenes, not wearing a mask, but he insists on taking that hydroxychloroquine. What would you advise him as a physician?
Yes, hi, David, and thank you for having me on the show. It is a difficult balance when it comes to these types of patients, the president, the vice president, giving instruction, giving medical consult. Ultimately, it's their decision, and we try to do our best with giving the appropriate scientific evidence behind why we make certain recommendations. Obviously, the federal government is recommending that people wear masks to not protect themselves, really, but to protect others. And so it behooves the president and the vice president to set the example for the American people. Also, it's a sign of respect that, we respect people around us, and we're trying to keep them safe. The president has been heard many times quoting how he gets tested every day and his tests are negative, but we know that the testing that's used at the White House, the Abbott testing, has been shown not to be as effective as we might have thought. And so is he getting false negative results? Potentially. And so, again, it is still an exposure risk. And so here's how I see this, David. Honestly, the president might be trying to be daring and defiant by not wearing this mask. But ultimately, I find it to be dumb and deceiving to the American people. He has to set the example as the leader of the free world, and that's really the only way that we're going to be able to convince the American people to do the right thing.
What about hydroxychloroquine? We've heard a lot about it. In fact, from the President of the United States himself, who's saying this really holds a lot of hope. And then we've heard a lot of reports that it's not clear it's effective. And on the other hand, it may have some really bad side effects. Where are you on that?
Right, absolutely. So up to today, we were saying, of course, that we didn't have any evidence to suggest that it was beneficial in order to prevent replication of the virus, as was once suggested by a very, very small study that was done with 50-some patients. Now, with the Lancet publishing their observational study today with a significant amount of patients, over 90,000 patients in a hospital setting, now we actually have evidence that it can prove, again, even dangerous for people who are hospitalized in clinical trials, who are getting this drug either alone or in combination with macrolide antibiotics such as azithromycin, again, because it can predispose to very severe and deadly cardiac arrhythmias. So even more so, we have evidence now that even in clinical settings, this is a dangerous drug to use, and there's really just no reason why anybody should be taking it at this particular point for COVID.
So whether it's PPE, masks, or whatever, or whether it's hydroxychloroquine, this is sort of treating the symptoms. It's not getting at the basic battle with vaccine. There seems to be a bit of a tension about whether the right place to put our emphasis, our money, our time, our effort, is in getting a vaccine as quickly as possible, or whether, on the other hand, we should be spending more time and effort on testing and then contact tracing. Where do you come out on that?
It's going to be a delicate balance of all of those, David. Obviously, ultimately, the way to prevent disease is going to be with the vaccine, the best way to do it. But we're not there yet. And obviously, we made great strides with the Oxford study and the Oxford vaccine trial that are now, ramping up to different phase with more human subjects. And obviously, as we know, AstraZeneca as well as the federal government are invested in this project. But until we get there, right, we still have to worry about reopening the economy and how we're going to prevent those spikes, those waves to come back of COVID cases. And the way that we can do that right now is really by testing and doing that contact tracing until we're able to get to a vaccine. If there's a spike now as we're reopening the economy, especially this weekend with Memorial Day weekend, beaches reopening, we have to be able to identify any new cases, a spike in cases, and then try to contain those areas so that we can prevent, further outbreaks.
So, Doctor, that is the issue, isn't it? I mean, we are reopening the economy, at various paces, but all 50 states now have backed off to some extent on their restrictions. And as we do that, isn't it inevitable there will be more cases? The question is, how quickly will we find them, and how quickly will we be able to react to them?
100%. There will be spikes. I mean, right now, as of today, not all the states are downtrending in terms of case numbers. Right here in Virginia, where I live, not only are we going up, I see it personally at the hospital, the increased amount of cases. And so, we can't let our guard down. Just because some states are seeing a decline, that does not mean that we're out of the woods. It does not mean we can let our guard down. And so inevitably and unfortunately, lives will be lost because we will become complacent. We will, let our guard down with social distancing, and people will start to see those cases rise in certain areas. And so that's what's going to be important, is being able to identify these people, test them, and be able to isolate them and trace any contacts that they might have had so that we can prevent further spread.
Doctor, we have a variety of approaches, certainly state by state and even within states. Certainly here in New York, for example, some parts are more open than other parts are, depending on what the science shows about the number of cases. Should we be having different rules based on other situations, such as, I'll take age, for example?
That's a great point. I think with age, it gets a little tricky just because, as we now know, certain populations or demographics that we thought were more protected, say that the younger children, we now know that that's not necessarily the case. Certainly your older, more vulnerable populations, the best recommendation is for those people to be more vigilant, potentially than others. But, it's difficult because you don't want to discriminate against one particular age group or not, but certainly elderly populations, we should be more careful about. But I think it's actually even more important with certain settings. So places like nursing homes, I would be extremely hesitant to see any nursing home open its doors this Memorial Day weekend and allowing visitors to come in, because that is an extremely vulnerable population. It's not necessarily based on age, but rather on the comorbidities of the people that reside there. Similarly with schools, I'm extremely hesitant to reopen schools at this particular point because children just inevitably are going to not be able to adhere to social distancing guidelines, right? And so those are, I would probably base it more on settings where these guidelines are just going to be difficult to adhere to versus necessarily age.
Fascinating. So one last question. It's a much more sensitive, actually, even than age, and that is race and ethnicity, because clearly there are strong indications now that African Americans, Hispanics, and Native Americans are more vulnerable to this disease.
Yes, absolutely. And as a Latino woman myself, this hits home for me, especially with my family, as well as seeing, my community overwhelmingly more affected in the hospital. I can tell you, David, that 2/3 of the patients I admit on a regular basis on shift are Latinos and Hispanics in the north of Virginia area. And so, a lot of that, as we now know, has to do with social determinants of health, healthcare disparities, access to healthcare, underlying comorbidities that our communities are just more predisposed to. So Black and Latino communities, things like diabetes and hypertension. And there's an aspect here of trust too, trust in the healthcare system. There's a huge gap that I've identified, lack of trust in healthcare providers. And so it behooves providers like myself who are part of that demographic to help bridge that gap as much as we can and regain that trust from the population.
Doctor, thank you so much for being with us. This was truly helpful. That is Dr. Jennifer Pena of the Oscar Medical Group. And now, as we wait for President Trump to hold a news conference that he has scheduled, although he's a bit late for, we want to go to our colleague, Mario Parker, who covers the White House for Bloomberg. So, Mario, this came up at least as a surprise to me about an hour ago. Did we expect this?
No, this is impromptu. It's been characteristic of this administration. This is something that struck us all about an hour ago, right around the same time.
Do we have any idea what the subject is? Because obviously it is Memorial Day weekend. He just had sort of a drive-by celebration, didn't he? Sort of commemorating the people who served and been lost. But on the other hand, we've also got a little issue with China that's percolating.
Sure, there's a couple of things. Well, one of the things, the president is, he's been busy with travel. Yesterday we were in Michigan, and so what we're expecting him to speak about here shortly is something that he kind of teased yesterday in Michigan, and that's that the CDC will release new guidelines as it relates to churches. So we're expecting him to weigh in on that first and foremost, and then as these news conferences have gone in the past, they'll undoubtedly go into those other subjects that you mentioned, China, Hong Kong, also, what he's looking for in terms of the next phase of reopening. The Memorial Day holiday weekend, of course, is a milestone. Typically, it kicks off the summer driving season and vacation season. So we'll expect to hear him talk about all those things as well.
Well, so Michigan is in some ways a hot spot. I mean, clearly it has been a hot spot for the coronavirus itself, but also there's been a lot of protests, as you know, even with people armed going into the state capitol there, protesting the Democratic governor's clampdown, stay-at-home order that President Trump has taken issue with. Did he address that issue while he was in, I think he was in Ypsilanti, wasn't he?
Yes, absolutely. It's interesting because I accompanied the president on that trip yesterday, and it was the feel is exactly what we're seeing from Washington. Sometimes what we see in Washington, and we go out, we may not get that picture, but no, it's exactly like that. On both sides of the highway and the streets that the motorcade traveled, there were supporters of the president. Looked like a campaign rally. Some of them also had signs where they criticized Governor Whitmer. But then you also had protesters or detractors.
Mario? I think we may have lost Mario. That's a loss. Our White House reporter who went with President Trump to Ypsilanti yesterday for that trip to a Ford plant that had opened. It was something of a cause of victory for him, although he did not wear a mask, at least for the photographs. And now we turn to Charlie Pellet for a market check. Charlie?
All right, thank you very much. Here's what's going on. We've got stocks trading mixed. Little change right now on the S&P 500 index, down by less than 1 point. Keep in mind, this is all ahead of a long holiday weekend. Going to be very interesting to see where this market closes. Right now, we are on track for a winning week for the S&P 500 index, up by more than 2%. Stocks pairing losses as the volatility that has whipsawed investors all week shows few signs of abating. The dollar strengthened, oil snapping a 6-day winning streak right now. West Texas Intermediate crude down 2.4%, lower by 80 cents a barrel, 33.12. We've got gold up 0.5%, up 8.80 the ounce now at 17.36. The 10-year up 4.30 seconds with a yield of 0.65%. S&P down a point, as I mentioned, little change there. The Dow is down 83, lower by 0.3%. And NASDAQ up 24, a gain there of 0.3%. Forward-looking U.S. economic data share a common message right off the second quarter, maybe even the third. And with more, here's Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
Key data issued this week offer a bleak assessment as 2020 approaches the half-year mark. April's leading indicators posted this second sharpest drop in 6 decades. Building permits signaled depressed housing starts, and the Bloomberg Consumer Comfort Index extended its decline. The data affirmed the Federal Reserve's outlook for extraordinary uncertainty and considerable risk over the medium haul. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
Subway, the sandwich chain Potbelly Corp is among corporations shamed into returning millions of dollars it got from the federal government's Paycheck Protection Program that was intended for small businesses. Now Potbelly has warned it may not be able to continue business operations. In a regulatory filing, Potbelly warned, quote, of substantial doubt that it will be able to meet its debt obligations within the next year and continuing operating. Shares of PBPB, that's the ticker on Potbelly lower now by 8.1%. Again, recapping, S&P 500 index virtually flat on the day. It is down now by less than 0.5 point. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Balance of power continues as we await President Trump. Back we go. And here's your host on a Friday, David Weston.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. Well, Charlie said it. We are waiting for President Trump. He has called an impromptu news conference, which we will bring you when it starts. But in the meantime, we're going to talk about China a little bit. The National People's Congress is underway in Beijing, and news that Beijing will clamp down on Hong Kong is sending a shiver through the markets, and no doubt through some boardrooms as well. Welcome back now, Carly Fiorina, founder and chairman of Carly Fiorina Enterprises and Unlocking Potential, and I want to say also the author of a brand new newsletter, a weekly newsletter on LinkedIn called Leadership Matters. Carly, thank you so much for being with us. Great to have you. So give us a sense,
David.
Give us your read on China right now. The rhetoric is getting pretty hot.
Yes, it is. And unfortunately, I think we shouldn't be surprised by this. I mean, China has been signaling its intentions toward Hong Kong for quite some time now. The one thing you can always say about China is they are strategic and consistent. And I think under President Xi, it's been very clear for a long time that China's strategy is to increase their global influence, their military power, their economic power, and Hong Kong is a thorn in their side and has been for some time. I think they are willing to take the short-term economic hit to clamp down. They have become more totalitarian, not less. That's a disappointment. Obviously, we had different hopes when they entered the WTO many decades ago. And we need a consistent strategic response in return because obviously we are economically interdependent. They are a huge market for our companies, and that's why you see the stock market swoon or at least quiver every time there's a bad headline. And it's why boardrooms are very much concerned right now.
There's a fair amount of U.S. investments, big companies in Hong Kong, particularly in the financial sector. As a practical matter, do they need to be hedging their bets, or maybe they already have?
Well, I hope they already have. Yes, I think as a practical matter, they do need to be hedging their bets. And I must say, this bipartisan bill that's being discussed to make it much more difficult for Chinese companies to list on the New York Stock Exchange, I actually think that is a reasonable response. Because, in fact, China has had access to all of our markets, including our capital markets, in a way that American companies, no company has had access in Chinese markets. And I think the Chinese do respond to things that impact their economic well-being, and this is a move that will.
But is this a situation, Carly, where we'd be awfully better off if we got our allies with us? Because if you can't list in the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ, why don't you just go across to London and list on the London Stock Exchange?
There's no question. There is no question we should be working closely with our allies on this and many other things, including the pandemic. There's no question that our allies are as concerned about China and have been for some time as we are. There's no question that we ought to be playing a leadership role in terms of constraining China in many ways. And honestly, I think our response has been inconsistent, unpredictable, which is not helpful as far as trying to rein in China is concerned. And we are not leading a group of allies, and we should be.
Is anyone taking a far-sighted view on China right now as you look around, whether in the government or elsewhere, where you say, okay, they really understand that sort of consistent, clear, strategic vision that we need to have when it comes to China?
Well, honestly, in terms of the government, not that I can think of. I mean, there are people on both sides of the aisle in the Senate who have had a long-term view of China, and I hope that they are working together on an appropriate response to China's move in Hong Kong, because I think an appropriate response will make a difference. There are a number of think tanks on both sides of the aisle that have been talking intelligently about China for a very long time. So it's not that there isn't expertise there. There is. What I'm saying isn't news or particularly newsworthy, but I think what's concerning is that while President Trump's goals on China have been appropriate, while Peter Navarro's goals on China have been appropriate, what I haven't necessarily seen is those goals translated into a steady strategy that puts pressure on China, which they understand and they can predict. This back and forth, we're best friends, no, we're enemies, we're going to have tariffs, no, we're not. It isn't how China operates, and they won't respond well to that. They haven't responded well.
Once again, we're talking with Carly Fiorina, the former CEO of Hewlett-Packard, as we wait for President Trump to begin this impromptu news conference. So, Carly, I mentioned before you have a new venture, Leadership Matters, which is the name of your newsletter, weekly newsletter, which will be coming out. And actually, you have the first one out. Tell us why you're doing this. What is the need that you're filling?
Well, you know, Carly Fiorina Enterprises focuses on leadership development in the business community. I know I've spent my career building leaders and building effective teams and building cultures, and so Carly Fiorina Enterprises provides that expertise to businesses. Unlocking Potential provides that expertise to the nonprofit community, which does so much good work under very difficult circumstances. I decided to launch the newsletter after a series of posts on LinkedIn because during this pandemic, there are a lot of people who are looking for pretty practical advice on what do I do and how do I do it. And leadership is always about changing the order of things for the better. So leadership always matters, but it particularly matters in a crisis. It particularly matters when times are uncertain and fraught with risk. And so I wanted to provide this as a service to anyone who's interested in reading this. So I hope your listeners will connect with us on LinkedIn and find that newsletter useful.
So give them a little bit of a tease here. You've got the first one on. It's about fear, dealing with fear. Tell us about what you have to say there.
Well, what happens when a crisis hits is people get afraid. Now, in the business community, we like to think we're only driven by the facts and the numbers, but the truth is people are people, and people get afraid. And what happens when people are fearful is they freeze. They get paralyzed. And what we need to be doing, particularly in a time of crisis, is problem solving and moving forward. What also happens when people are afraid is they don't think expansively or creatively. They tend to sort of go with what they know. They tend to hunker down and go with what's familiar. And in an unprecedented time of crisis, that's frequently exactly the wrong thing to do. And so this first newsletter is all about how do I confront my fear so that I can get over it. Everybody's afraid, but let's confront our fear, name our fear, deal with our fear so that we can move from paralysis to problem solving. And that's what this particular issue of the newsletter is all about, how to deal with fear, how to confront it, how to get over it, and some tools to help people do that in a very practical way.
And it strikes me, Carly, that right now, this week, this may be the big question on so many levels, because it's not just the fear of a leader or even a follower, it's also a fear of a consumer. I talked to Brian Moynihan from Bank of America this week. He said, look, we're doing better than we thought we would be doing, but the question is, once you open the economy back up, are people going to have the courage, feel safe enough to come back out and make the big purchases and make the big investments? And we don't know the answer to that question. The question is, how can we get at the American people to overcome their fear?
Yes, well, and of course, Brian Moynihan has it relatively easy in this department. When you read about Ford opening up their plants and then having to shut their plants immediately because they had 2 positive cases of COVID, or you hear restaurants like Shake Shack saying, you know what, we're just not going to open up at all other than for takeout, which is what we've been doing because we don't know how to do that in a safe and profitable way. So it's not just consumers that are afraid, how do I keep safe? It's also businesses wondering, what are the costs of opening up? What are the costs of staying open under these kinds of constraints? Only 25% capacity, et cetera, et cetera. But you and I have talked about this before, David. Unless and until consumers feel safe, they are not going to spend at the level. And unfortunately, their fears are rational. I mean, what all the health experts are telling us is being in close quarters with a lot of people is not wise right now. And so, there's irrational fear, and then there's rational fear that says, I need to change my habits in order to keep myself and my family safe.
Carly, you mentioned Shake Shack. We just had Danny Meyer on, who, of course, founded Shake Shack. And, of course, he has his own restaurant group with quite a few restaurants, over 20 in the New York area. And one of the things he said was, there's a limit to what a restaurant can do to make you feel safe. This is not like TSA with a metal detector, where we can put you through some metal detector and you know whether you have the virus or not. That as a practical matter, we may have to wait till the science, either through treatment or vaccine, really takes care of this for people to truly feel safe again, which could be a while.
Yes. And, I think that's a very practical response. It's not the response that every restaurant will take or every leader will take. But he's right. There are only so many things you can do to make people feel confident and comfortable. But the other reality is that it costs a lot of money to make people feel safe and to do it at 25% capacity. That's just not a business proposition that's going to work for a lot of restaurants. They need high volume to be profitable. And I think the reason I brought up the Ford experience is because I think what Ford probably learned is that it cost them more to open up their 2 plants and then shut them down, deep clean them, and disinfect them than it would have to just delay their opening for a week. So this is a great uncertainty for sure. And there are not any easy answers or silver bullets, but a start is to say, what am I afraid of as a leader? What is my organization afraid of? Let's name that fear. Let's face that fear. And then let's get around to thinking through all of the possibilities of how we move forward. Not that they're easy answers or silver bullets, But hunkering down and not moving at all isn't the answer either.
And a critical part of that, I think, is having data that you believe is reliable. I mean, you can't overcome fear if the facts keep changing on you, which I think a lot of Americans feel that right now. We don't know enough about this virus. We don't know about what the consequences until and unless we can get that sort of reliable data where we think we know exactly what this is about. It's awfully hard to overcome that fear.
Well, that's right. And add to that, David, the fact that the facts about this virus have gotten politicized to some extent. I mean, there are real people out there with real audiences who started out by saying this was a hoax, who are now saying that the death counts aren't real. I mean, in other words, there's incomplete information, there's misinformation, there's conflicting information. And speaking of fear, what any psychologist will tell you, and what I've observed in leading teams for decades, is that when people don't know, when they're not certain, they assume the worst, never the best. So all this swirling misinformation, conflicting information, lack of information causes people to become more uncertain, actually.
So what did you do when you were running a very, very big company? Because as a practical matter, you need to make decisions and you never have perfect information. You never know everything you want to know. You have to make a decision. How did you figure out a system that says, I believe enough that I can act on this?
Yes, well, it's a critical point. Number one, you have to make sure that you seek advice, opinion, and fact widely. So in other words, you have to take the time to really get facts, opinions, advice. A lot of times people will rush that step and say, no, I know this. I know enough. In my experience, actually, there is a danger in not spreading a wide net to get expertise, information, advice. So getting all of those opinions and the full picture, let me say, is critical. Having said that, David, to your point, you can't do that forever. At a certain point, you have to make a decision. And so then once you've cast a wide net for information and expertise, then you have to begin to weigh pros and cons and risks and benefits. In my experience, the most helpful thing you can do to move an organization along is to explain your thought process. Not to pretend that you have all the information, but to say, here is what we know, here is what we don't know, here is how we assess the risk, here is how we assess the upside or the benefit or the opportunity, and here is why we have made the decision we are making, so that people understand the rationale. And so, if necessary, they also understand we may make a different decision if new information presents itself.
It sounds so wise and clearly right. The other thing that I think I've seen, in fact, I know I've seen, is sometimes very powerful leaders have people around them who tell them what they think they want to hear. And as soon as you have that, you're in trouble. You have to somehow imbue a culture that I want the facts. There are no bad facts. Facts are facts. They're true. And so no matter how ugly it is, bring it to me.
Yes, that's exactly right. And, of course, I fear that we suffer from that right now in the White House. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that that's the case. And it's very dangerous for any leader. People have asked me over the years, what's the most dangerous thing for a leader? And I said the most dangerous thing for a leader is to become isolated, to have yes people around them, and to be told what they want to hear. Because what happens over time is decisions get poorer and poorer. They get worse and worse. And of course, it's also true that when people tell you what you want to hear, it's not just that your decision making gets worse over time. It's that literally you no longer are seeing the truth. And one of the first things I said in my LinkedIn post was, it is a leader's job to see the truth, to speak the truth, and to act on the truth. So if you can no longer see the truth, you certainly can't tell it to other people, but you can't act on it either.
Fascinating. Carly, it's always a treat to have you with us. Thank you so much. That is Carly Fiorina. She is founder and chairman of Carly Fiorina Enterprises and Unlocking Potential, and now the author of the new weekly newsletter, Leadership Matters. That is on LinkedIn. You want to go to LinkedIn so you can see Carly's newsletter. In the meantime, we continue to wait for President Trump's impromptu news conference, and in the meantime, let's get a market check from Charlie Pellet.
All right, I thank you very much, and here's what's going on, David Weston. We've got the Dow, the S&P lower, little changed on the S&P, NASDAQ holding on to gains. All of this ahead of a long holiday weekend. Got to stay with Bloomberg Radio right through the closing bell to see how things shake out. Here's where we stand right now. S&P down a point, little change, 29.46. NASDAQ up 19. That is a gain of 0.2%. The Dow down 76, a drop there of 0.3%. 10-year yield 0.65%. Gold is up 0.5%, 17.35 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude now down 2.3%, 33.12 a barrel. S&P 500 index again little changed. It is up more than 2% on the week after surging Monday and Wednesday. Volatility in markets today comes as traders brace for tension between the U.S. and Washington and Beijing. President Trump speaking now in Washington. Let's listen in for a live speech.
I want to thank Dr. Redfield and the CDC for their work on this matter and all the other work they've been doing over the past what now seems like a long period of time. Today I'm identifying houses of worship, churches, synagogue, and mosques as essential places that provide essential services. Some governors have deemed liquor stores and abortion clinics as essential, but have left out churches and other houses of worship. It's not right. So I'm correcting this injustice and calling houses of worship essential. I call upon governors to allow our churches and places of worship to open right now. If there's any question, they're going to have to call me, but they're not going to be successful in that call. These are places that hold our society together and keep our people united. The people are demanding to go to church and synagogue, go to their mosque. Many millions of Americans embrace worship as an essential part of life. The ministers, pastors, rabbis, imams, and other faith leaders will make sure that their congregations are safe as they gather and pray. I know them well. They love their congregations. They love their people. They don't want anything bad to happen to them or to anybody else. The governors need to do the right thing and allow these very important, essential places of faith to open right now for this weekend. If they don't do it, I will override the governors. In America, we need more prayer, not less. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. President, what is your
All right, everyone. It's a pleasure to join you today. That was a great announcement from President Trump. I'd like to introduce Dr. Birx right now. She has a wonderful presentation pursuant to Reopening America and some great data to share with you, so I'll let her kick this off.
Thank you, Kaylee. If we can have the first slide, please. I wanted to start out with a summary of the number of Americans we have lost to date. But the exciting thing for all of us is the decreasing mortality over time. And I think it both is a real aspect of the amazing healthcare workers on the front line, the ability of people to share at the front line how best to care for the patients, and the continuous decrease in mortality over time. Next slide. The other thing that has decreased significantly over the last month is new hospitalizations. We can see now that there's over a 50% decline in new hospitalizations. Although every region of the country is different, we are encouraged to see these new hospitalizations declining. Next slide. I've talked before about the extensive surveillance that CDC has made available to this country. This is looking at their syndromic surveillance from emergency rooms. You can see that both COVID-like illnesses, shown in the orange, and shown in the blue, influenza-like illness, Taking up both of those cases together, you can see significant declines week over week. A number of people coming to the emergency room with these illnesses. It goes along with our new hospitalizations. What we like to do is triangulate data, put data together from multiple sources to see if we're seeing the same trends so that we can ensure that we're making progress together. Next slide. This is their influenza-like illness surveillance system that has been up and running for more than a decade now. You can see each of the influenza peaks of this last year.
We have been listening first to President Donald Trump making an announcement about opening churches and synagogues and mosques, calling on the governors to open them as critical places. And he says that if they don't do it, he will overrule them. We'll see whether he has that authority, but he says basically we should be opening our churches in a safe way across the country. And then we heard the beginning of Dr. Birx giving her report on the decline in cases, at least decline in the number of cases being created from under coronavirus. So that's what we've been listening to there. In the meantime, just before the Memorial Day weekend, we want to get a check on the markets, and for that we go to Kriti Gupta. So Kriti, where are we right now on the markets? That wasn't too much headline risk, I don't think. We were talking about before. I'm not sure the markets will react to the news about opening the churches.
No, not quite market moving. It's just the same story. We're seeing some low volume today ahead of that long weekend, of course. The S&P down just marginally. Dow underperforming, though, down 0.4%. So the NASDAQ still in the green, though. That is, of course, the outperformer as we see that bid for tech stay with us here. Nothing really market moving. Once again, we are on low volume, and it's really all about any headlines on China. That seems to be the major mover. If we see any, it is unlikely, though, that we will today.
Curious that tech is going up when China usually gets tech nervous.
It is. It's an interesting dynamic. But once again, you have to keep in mind that a lot of these companies that are driving the NASDAQ up are companies that have very long supply chains. They have alternative routes. They've also gone through this whole saga with that kind of China risk with the trade war last year. So you do want to keep in mind that when you're looking at these tech companies, the names Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, they're also very cash-rich, very liquid global growth companies. So not necessarily the first to be hit by that China news. It's really more of the semiconductors that you really want to watch out for.
So Kriti, look out to the future here just a little bit, if you will. We're basically through earnings season, right? Not much left there?
That's right.
So that's not
grim earnings season.
but it's not going to move the markets. Doesn't look like at this point. We're going to have to wait for the next earnings season. You have the China issue you identified, and then you have the science on the coronavirus. Are those the things that are most likely to move the market? Because it hasn't really been going in one direction or another for the last few days, right? It's been up and down all around.
It has, and we've seen the S&P 500 in particular trade in a bit of a technical range. So keep in mind that although we are talking about the fundamental reasons here, you've laid them out perfectly. There are some technical factors at play as well. So it's not just going to be a straight shot up that you may see in the NASDAQ, for example, a very clear V-shaped recovery in those stocks. The S&P 500, that's a little bit more inclusive, showing a little bit of kind of resistance as it makes its way back up from that bear market that we saw. Something important to keep in mind, though, is that it seems that on the bear side, that China's story is really playing to that downside risk. On the bullish side, though, it's anything that has to do with reopening. So, for example, when we saw those comments from Dr. Fauci earlier today, a lot of that wasn't necessarily on vaccine optimism. It was on the fact that he was supporting reopening the economy in a healthy way. And that seems to be outdoing some of that race for the vaccine, some of the optimism that was driving the rally just earlier this week.
Yeah, and of course, the interesting question is you could reopen the economy, but people actually have to come back into the stores and the restaurants and go back into the workplace. And we're not sure what the psychology is yet, so we'll have to wait and find out what that is. Okay, Kriti, really thank you so much for being with us today. It's Kriti Gupta. She is Bloomberg Live cross-asset reporter. We always love to have her on. That's going to do it for this week's edition of Balance of Power. And now we're looking forward to a nice long Memorial Day weekend, I hope. I'm David Weston, and this is Bloomberg.
At the start of every day, you can't predict.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs.
Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
Where do sports, culture, and basketball nostalgia collide? On their podcast, Knuckleheads, NBA veterans Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles sit down with athletes, musicians, and entertainers to get brutally honest, totally unguarded conversations about everything from current events to untold stories from the golden era of sports.
Kill O'Neal. You know that, right? I tried to tip dunk all the free throw line one time.
Search Knuckleheads on TuneIn to listen. Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
He does! Fabry wins it!
To standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
The NHL is always on the ice with these awesome hockey podcasts on TuneIn. Get your goal with the Spittin' Chicklets podcast.
Brian Yandel, Keith Yandel, thanks for coming on. What's going on?
Nothing much. Glad to be here. You guys got some nice digs here.
We heard you took Southwest 2-stop flight to get out here.
Yeah, well, you know, just
carve up the ice with NHL at the rink.
The other day, I wrote a story. Artemi Panarin, Semyon Varlamov, Sergei Bobrovsky, they all helped arrange for the purchase of N95 masks to benefit hospitals in their respective markets. This is another one of those positive stories you're seeing.
Or create your own power play with Locked On NHL.
All these teams invested future assets to take a run at the Stanley Cup right now. Like, all of those teams would have a real serious gripe, like trading these multiple first-round picks to make a run at a cup. You're right.
Discover these and more NHL podcasts right here on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
World 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
So here we are on the eve of the unofficial start to summer. It is Friday, May 22nd, 2020, ahead of the long weekend. Live from New York and New Jersey, streaming on YouTube. Jason, what's interesting is we've got a big China component to our show today.
We do. I'm not sure that that's what we expected to be talking about at the end of the week. But then again, we're at the end of week 10 of shelter in place, working from home. The country is reopening a bit, but this China story is a big one and an important one economically, politically, and I think just as we're trying to get back to normal, this could throw things off kilter, I think it's fair to say.
And what's interesting is I feel like we've been here before, but yet here we are again. All right, we're going to talk about China and so much more over the next 4 hours. First up, though, let's take a look at that trading day. Here is Charlie.
Hi, thank you very much. Happy Friday to you both. What a week it has been. It is an up week for the U.S. stock market. Right now we're trading mixed, but you got to stay with Bloomberg Business Week right through the close. Going to be very interesting to see how things shake out ahead of a long holiday weekend. Here's where we stand right now. We've got the S&P. It is down less than half a point. Let's call that flat on the day. The Dow is down 71 now, lower by 0.3%. NASDAQ still holding on to a 21-point gain, up by 0.2%. The volatility that has whipsawed investors all week showing few signs of abating. Right now we have got the volatility as traders brace for tension between Washington and Beijing to escalate after China announced plans overnight to impose a national security law on Hong Kong. 10-year up 4/32, yield there 0.65%. We've got gold up 0.4%, $17.34 the ounce. Crude slumping 2.8% right now, $32.99 a barrel. Again, recapping, equities mixed with the S&P up now by just half a point. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Well, as Carol said, our top story today, it is China. So let's set the Business Week agenda by going to our expert, Tom Orlik, Chief Economist for Bloomberg Economics, joining us on the phone from Washington, D.C. Tom, we really appreciate you spending some time with us ahead of this long weekend. This is a series of headlines. It's not really limited to one story. It's a series of stories we've seen throughout the week, build and build, culminating a lot with what's going on in Hong Kong and Beijing's reaction to that. Set the stage for us. What do we need to know at this moment?
I think you put it really well, Jason. It's not just one thing. It's a lot of things happening at the same time. So I think the big one is what's happening in China's relationship with Hong Kong. Now, remember that for the last several years, there have been waves of protest in Hong Kong as a large group of the local population, many of them students and young people, protest against what they see as an encroachment on the former colony's autonomy and kind of the creeping influence of Beijing. Now, what seems to have happened is that Beijing has got sick of this. And instead of waiting for the Hong Kong legislators to pass some laws making it harder to protest, what's happened is that China has taken matters into its own hands. China's National People's Congress is passing a new national security law which will directly impact on Hong Kong. And what the protesters are going to say is that this is a further encroachment, a further erosion of the former colony's autonomy. Likely the consequence is going to be a return to protests.
All right, so a return to protest. Tom, I wonder if we're on the cusp of something significantly changing when it comes to Hong Kong. And by that I mean, could we see more independence? Could we see more oversight by China? It certainly seems like the move today says more oversight.
Yeah, I think this is certainly a shift in the direction of more oversight, more control being exercised in Beijing, less liberty for people in Hong Kong to express their views. I think the immediate question for the Hong Kong economy is, well, if we go back into mass protests, if we see millions of people hitting the streets again, what does that mean for the immediate outlook, especially against the backdrop of a world now in a recession?
Right.
Clearly, this would add to the downward pressure in Hong Kong. Looking a bit further forward, Hong Kong is a crucially important financial center. It's the place where global money, it's sort of the gateway for global money to get into China and for Chinese money to come out to the rest of the world. And that underpinned, that global role has been underpinned by Hong Kong's stability, by Hong Kong's rule of law, by Hong Kong's relative independence from control from the mainland. So a question going forward is, well, does that start to change? Does Hong Kong's financial center status start to get eroded? And then the last big point I would raise is, look, this is not the only flashpoint between China and the United States.
Right.
We've also got a Senate bill which makes it harder for Chinese firms to list in the United States. We've got a trade deal between China and the United States that looks like it might break down. We've got U.S. concern about human rights in Xinjiang. And now we have this Hong Kong issue. So could we have just a more serious breakdown in U.S.-China relations? Could we slide back into a trade war? And what would that mean? What would that then mean for the global economy?
And I'm so happy you put it in that context, because I think for someone who is not as well versed as you are, Tom, they're looking at markets, they're looking at headlines on the Bloomberg and seeing stocks, at least initially this morning, trading down, futures certainly trading down, and thinking, wait, how does this play? How does this play together? You laid it out very well. This is the intersection of global commerce, and certainly when it comes to finance, but also an emblem of this larger tension that really could hurt the global economy at a time when the global economy is, to say the least, already back on its heels.
No, I think that's completely right, Jason. If we think back to the 1930s, what was the big problem then? Well, the global economy went into a slump, and then we had an escalation of protectionism. and so the trade system broke down. And so you had a recession, you had protectionism, you put those together, and the global economy went into a depression, which took years to exit from. What did we do? Sorry, Carol.
No. Please finish.
So what did we do right in 2008? Well, there was a massive financial crisis, but world leaders managed to pull back from the brink on protectionism. And so the global trade system kept operating. We didn't get a great recovery, but we got a recovery. Now here we are in 2020. I think the echoes of the mistakes which were made in 1930 are getting harder to ignore.
You always tell us why we care, and you put it all together. You tie it all up. Tom, thank you so much. Really appreciate it, and have a good and safe weekend. Tom Orlick, Chief Economist at Bloomberg Economics. Jason, a great setup for what we're hoping to cover over the next 4 hours. We got a lot coming up.
We do. In fact, Elon Musk, heard of him. He called up Ashley Vance, also heard of him because he literally wrote the book on Elon Musk. They had a conversation. Ashley Vance is going to tell us what Elon Musk said, and I think we know he's not shy.
No, he's not shy at all. Speaking of conversations, we're going to talk a lot about sports and flying. Both of those worlds proceeding very cautiously. Joe McClain, he manages money for top professional athletes. We'll see what he has to say about the sports world. Also, the president and CEO of Sentient Jet is going to be with us. We're also going to talk about luxury and real estate, or high-end real estate. Jonathan Miller of Miller Samuel will be here.
We're also going to talk about that new $1,000 Peloton and what it may mean for the company, what it may mean for you as a consumer. Also going to give you a taste of a conversation I had with Harvey Spivak, speaking of fitness, the chairman of Equinox. So much more ahead. As Charlie Pelt says, keep it locked here to Bloomberg Business Week, all the way through the close and beyond. Let's do the Bloomberg Business Week bite of the day. In the meantime, Carol, it's one number that tells us a lot. Today's number, $32.
Yep. $32. The hottest ticket in New York City this summer, it could well be the $32 it costs for movie screenings in the parking lot of Astoria's Bel Air Diner in Queens. The Bel Air only has room for 45 socially distanced cars in the lot adjacent to its restaurant, so making its drive-in style kind of screenings hyper exclusive, which is why the $32 cost. Screenings are only scheduled about a week out, have been selling out quickly. If you're lucky enough to score tickets, you can order diner food from your car, and for every bag of popcorn sold, the diner feeds 2 first responders. Love that.
Yeah, it's great. So drive on over if you can. All right, let's get to world national news headlines now. Bob Moon has those. Hey, Bob.
Jason, thank you very much. President Trump says he has deemed churches and other houses of worship essential and called on governors to allow them to reopen this weekend, despite the threat of the coronavirus. He said today that he's identifying houses of worship, churches, synagogues, and mosques as essential places that provide essential services. Trump made the announcement during a hastily arranged press conference today at the White House. He said if governors don't abide by his request, he will override them, though it's unclear what authority he has to do so. Heading into the Memorial Day weekend, President Trump Heading into the Memorial Day weekend, President Trump hosted bikers and veterans today, marking Rolling to Remember, honoring U.S. veterans, prisoners of war, and those missing in action. The president welcomed them from the Blue Room balcony.
Thank you for keeping this noble tradition alive and for preserving the memory of those who are missing, but never forgotten. Never forgotten.
This year, the Memorial Day Rolling Thunder demonstration is aimed at raising awareness of veteran suicides. You're likely to see flags of half-staff this weekend before Memorial Day. From Washington, Bloomberg's Amy Morris explains why.
President Trump says U.S. flags will be flown at half-staff today, tomorrow, and Sunday as the death toll from COVID-19 in the U.S. surpasses 95,000 people. The president tweeted yesterday the flags will be lowered on all federal buildings and national monuments nationwide in the memory of the Americans who were lost. He says the flags will continue to be flown at half-staff on Memorial Day in honor of those in the military who died serving the country. In Washington, I'm Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
Why can't you just go to some remote island and wait till all this is over?
The range of outcomes is so wide.
Because it's your job.
What do you think some of the structural changes might result?
Fortunately, it's our job too.
How's value done in this market?
Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz.
It's very hard to make a forecast.
Bloomberg Markets.
This could be a lower for longer type of hit.
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Imagine being fired because of who you love.
Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
COVID-19. On days when it seems there are nothing but questions.
What about the pandemic emergency purchase program in Europe?
What's the medical side of this?
We try to ask good ones.
How long until we have an answer on what drugs can help us fight this pandemic?
How do you think this has the potential to rattle markets?
Does that mean we should shut down?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
It's a rather controversial question being asked.
Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Sweet strawberry icing. You're in Goodwill, and just past that vintage denim jacket you spot miniature donut earrings. You lean in. That's the scent of shopping success. Because at Goodwill, every item you buy funds local job training and more. So bring home those donut earrings and bring home so much good to your community. Goodwill. Bring good home. Brought to you by Goodwill and the Ad Council.
If knowledge is power...
This is a message from the government. There is new guidance to help businesses and employees who cannot work from home be COVID-19 secure at work. The advice will help you conduct a risk assessment, put social distancing measures in place, improve hygiene and cleaning in the workplace, and look after the well-being of your employees. Every workplace is different. Use the guidance to make your business COVID-19 secure. Access the support you need at gov.uk/working-safely. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the Uswitch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistant systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. Visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
For more than 20 years, Asda supported our communities. We've raised over £23 million for Fair Share and the Trussell Trust. And recently, we've donated supplies to frontline NHS workers and carers. We've always been proud to serve those around us. Visit asda.com/creating change for better. Asda, we're all in this together.
Typical Danny. Last night, I was chilling with my girls, but ended up spilling my Chardonnay all over my fave lilac nightie when I saw the photo I was tagged in. State of my fake tan. But no worries, just one wash and my clothes will smell perf with Surf. Surf gives you long-lasting fragrance with natural essential oils. Find your fragrance in Surf's laundry range.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Hi, I'm Dan from NatWest Manchester branch. We know life's hard right now, but if coronavirus has affected your finances, we're doing our best to make things easier. If you're a personal customer, you can request a 3-month payment break if you're struggling with your mortgage, loan or credit card. Or if you need help with an existing arranged overdraft, you could get £500 interest-free for 3 months. Remember, every one of us is here to support you. There are lots of ways we could help. Search NatWest Coronavirus.
Eligibility and conditions apply to payment breaks. Overdraft up to your agreed limit if lower than £500.
Thanks
to National Lottery players. South Denbighshire Community Partnership are now delivering Hot Wheels to elderly people in the community like Bob and Sarah.
Thank you.
And £600 million of National Lottery funding is on its way to thousands more local projects across the UK during these exceptional times.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
The National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
At Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. U.S. stocks now at the best level of the day. S&P's up 4 points. Stocks turned higher as the volatility that has whipsawed investors all week shows few signs of abating. The dollar strengthened, oil snapping that 6-day winning streak right now. Oil West Texas Intermediate crude down 60 cents a barrel, dropping 1.8%, 33.31. 10-year up 4.30 seconds, the yield 0.65%. We've got the S&P up 4 points now, higher by 0.1%, 29.52, on track for a winning week. The Dow is lower by 25 points, down 0.1%. NASDAQ holding on to a 33-point gain, up by 0.4%. Again, recapping, equities higher with the S&P up 4, up 0.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It is indeed. Charlie Pellet, thank you so much. Well, our top stories on the virus, you've been hearing them throughout the day here at Bloomberg. Those anti-malaria drugs that President Trump has touted to fight COVID-19, well, they're linked to an increase of death and heart ailments. Meantime, you've got Oxford and AstraZeneca. They're starting to recruit subjects for advanced human studies of one of the fastest-moving experimental vaccines. And then Dr. Fauci, he said he was, quote, cautiously optimistic about Moderna's vaccine, boosting that stock once again. So let's get an update. Let's see what you really need to walk away with before we get into the holiday weekend. Dr. Ian Lustbader is Clinical Associate Professor of Medicine at NYU Langone Medical Center, joining us once again on the phone from New York. Ian, good to have you back again. How was your week?
Thank you, Carol and Jason. Hope you guys are doing well.
Yeah.
I think it's been overall a good week. You know, we are all trying to transition back to whatever a more normal environment is. Certainly we're seeing fewer cases in the hospital with acute COVID-19. Still a number of patients who are in the hospital, and certainly we're still touched by death. Yesterday, a colleague of mine who's a cardiologist died, not very old, at 70, and very vital, great teacher. So I think we're all touched one way or another by friends or family or people that we know. So it's still, a very serious disease. Fortunately, the numbers here are going down. There's some data, perhaps in South America, that the number of cases are going up, which is a concern. And we're trying to transition back to normal patient flow. What's interesting is a lot of the floors that were previously medical or surgical, most of the hospital converted to COVID patients. Those patients, many of them, fortunately, have been discharged, and now sort of awaiting the return of regular patients. And what's interesting to see is that volume is not 100%. So it seems that many patients with abdominal pain, chest pain, elective surgery needs are slow to return to the regular healthcare system. Which may reflect either, fears about getting care, maybe fears about getting COVID, but certainly I think the medical system is ready to return to, dealing with patients who might have postponed some of their care and are anxious to have those patients back.
So, Ian, talk to us about New York City at this point. We heard from Governor Cuomo that by next week, essentially every region of this state, of New York State, will be in the early phases and further along in reopening, save for New York City. We know about the density. We know about the fact that this was the epicenter really in the entire United States. Help us understand what needs to happen, because my understanding is that part of it is available beds and basically hospital capacity. That is one threshold that the city has yet to meet. Help us understand that.
Well, I think it's very hard to turn on hospital availability like a light switch. When you start filling up your hospital with, elective surgery and other surgical procedures or cardiac cases and so forth, if there's a sudden surge in patients, it's very hard to quickly get those patients out. So it's always better to anticipate what your needs may be, whether it's ventilators or ICU space. But it does seem at this time, whether or not social distancing and mitigation measures have helped, or whether it's the better weather, we don't really know. But the number of new cases does seem to be reducing, so that's certainly very, encouraging. And I think we have to address our regular patients and other patients, to deal with those issues. And I think this is really unknown. It's a new virus, and how people will get back, how safe it will be in businesses and offices. I think people will begin to come back in a slower fashion. People who can work from home probably will still be encouraged to work from home. But I think there's a lot of benefit to people getting back to normal psychologically. There may be some people who still want to work from home, may be more efficient. There's some people who say they're working longer hours, from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Right.
And actually even being more productive.
Yeah, I think Jason and I've had some of those conversations that, I think I went into this, wasn't quite sure how it was going to work. And I feel probably more productive on a lot of different levels. So it's kind of interesting, this experience. What did you make of the president taking hydrochloroquine?
So that has been asked to me by a number of patients and colleagues and friends. And I think because we do not have any medication really that we know of to reduce the incidence of COVID-19 or the symptoms, we're very lucky that 80% of patients approximately, more or less, seem to do fairly well. And a smaller percent, again, for unclear reasons. We know some risk factors. Again, we talked about age and weight and diabetes and hypertension do deteriorate. We don't really have great medications to bend that curve. We certainly know hydroxychloroquine is very useful for rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, malaria prophylaxis. We also know from many studies it's not very helpful at all once you're hospitalized and used sort of late in the disease or when patients are very sick. There are a number of studies going on now to see in a controlled way, and we don't really have good randomized controlled studies. So those are starting now, but there's a lot of anecdotal evidence, small case studies and individual reports where it does seem to reduce the viral replication, does seem to reduce the severity of the disease, or maybe actually prevent some people from getting the disease. So they're used early on, it may be very helpful. And I think in the White House, where I, to best guess, 30 or 40 people there have it.
Right. Ian, hang on a second, because we've just got to take a break and we'll come back. We're talking with Dr. Ian Lustbader of NYU Langone. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. This weekend marks the start of prime season for theme parks, but the coronavirus has left Six Flags, Cedar Fair, and others with empty parks and idle rides. Their stocks have been pummeled, and the clock is ticking for them to salvage what they can. Southwest Airlines expects its capacity later this year to be down about 30% from 2019. CEO Gary Kelly says that could leave the airline overstaffed, forcing Southwest into the first involuntary job cuts in its 49-year history. Amazon's Prime Air will grow to about 200 planes in the next 7 or 8 years from just 42 now. A DePaul University study says Prime Air could rival UPS in that time, as Amazon looks to accommodate 1- and 2-day delivery. It's been a quiet day on Wall Street as investors look ahead cautiously to the long weekend. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 19, the S&P 500 up 5, the Nasdaq up 36. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
GOAT, G-O-A-T, acronym, stands for Greatest of All Time. As in, spaghetti sandwiches for dinner? They're my fave. Dad, you're the GOAT.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers. With COVID-19,
picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
shipping footballs,
fruit trees,
and dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunnin to Fiala, he scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic game replays to start listening.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Looking to freshen up your listening on TuneIn? Head to the homepage to discover something new. There you'll see custom recommendations based on your listening habits, along with new episodes of shows you've enjoyed in the past. Uncover your next audio obsession on the homepage.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having
watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Coming up, we're going to continue our conversation with Ian Lustbader, our go-to doc. Want to understand what happens next, how worried he is about a second wave, and maybe some insights into how the testing on various fronts is working.
All right, looking forward to continuing that conversation. Let's get back to your top business stories and a look at the trading day. Hey, Charlie Pallett.
Well, hello there. Happy Friday to you both again. The S&P and NASDAQ higher. The Dow's lower. Stocks advancing as the volatility that has whipsawed investors all week shows few signs of abating. Right now, we've got the S&P up 4. That is a gain of 0.1%. The Dow does remain lower by 41 points, down about 0.2%. NASDAQ up 34, a gain there of 0.4%. Investors focusing very much on developments out of China, also ongoing concerns about reopening the U.S. economy. Oxford University and AstraZeneca started recruiting for advanced human studies of one of the fastest moving experimental vaccines, while a Russian institute says it used laboratory staff in a successful unofficial test on a potential vaccine. Dr. Andrew Pekosh is a professor of molecular microbiology and immunology at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, and he says you can't forget that hospitals still have to handle their non-COVID caseload.
The pandemic itself has been such a focus of the medical community and of people, but we have to remember that there are other things that are going on, other healthcare issues that need to be taken care of. Some reports this week about drops in pediatric vaccination rates are, of course, a concern, because things that are not getting done now will have implications later on in the year, maybe next year and the year afterwards.
Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Memorial Day marks the start of the prime season for theme parks. From now through Labor Day, they typically welcome the lion's share of guests and generate most of their annual revenue, but the coronavirus pandemic has left Six Flags Entertainment, Cedar Fair, and SeaWorld Entertainment, three of the world's largest theme park operators by attendance, with idle rides and empty properties. But shares of all three higher today on optimism about the season and the reopening. Six Flags up now by 0.7%. Shares of Cedar Fair, they use the ticker FUN, F-U-N. They're up now by 2.9%. SeaWorld up by 1.6%. Recapping, S&P higher by 4, up 0.2%. I'm Charlie Pallett. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly, Carol Masser. We're catching up with our pal, Dr. Ian Lustbader, Clinical Associate Professor of Medicine at NYU's Langone Medical Center, joining us on the phone from New York City. And when we left off, we were talking about some of the treatments that are out there. So, Ian, I want to ask you, since testing and tracing are going to be key to reopening, where are we on testing? What are we learning so far, both in sort of broad strokes, but also sort of specifically, what have you seen here in New York?
Great questions. So in terms of testing, everyone, whether they've had mild or no symptoms or severe symptoms, wants antibody testing, and those are generally pretty reliable. We're using some of the national labs for a blood draw and IgG levels, and it's interesting to me that there are some people who were very sick and they have antibody positive. That's great, not all unexpected. You've got some people who are very mild or no known exposure and they're positive, but we're also seeing, and I would say the majority of patients who are curious, negative blood tests for antibodies, and presumably that means those people definitely should be vaccinated when that is available, and hopefully soon. In terms of acute patients who are ill, We are now able to get those nasal swabs. Some people go to local urgent care where they may get nasal swabs or the saliva test. Many go to urgent care too and get antibody tests. Remember, that takes about 4 to 6 weeks after symptoms for the antibody test to be positive. But it seems there's a lot of curiosity, and when we get all that data, that will give us a denominator of how many people had exposure and really what the death rate is when those final numbers come through. But at the end of the day, because we have no specific treatment, even if someone is COVID swab positive, we really don't treat them. And that sort of harkens back to what we were talking about before with President Trump taking hydroxychloroquine. That may either prevent more severe disease or may prevent getting the disease or shorten symptoms. Other things, for example, vitamin D, some zinc, vitamin C, all of those may play a role. I urge patients to talk to their doctor about it. If you're vitamin D deficient, probably good to take a supplement. The hydroxychloroquine does have risks. People really should get an EKG baseline. We've used it for years successfully in rheumatoid arthritis and lupus, and patients do very well on that. If I was the president and surrounded by 30 or 40 people, including my valet I wish I had a valet, but had I had a valet who was sick, I would definitely say, hey, maybe I should take hydroxychloroquine. There is some data. I'm not sure that's appropriate for everyone to do, and I think that's sort of the issue, that you're a role model and you sort of, everyone then says, hey, if he's taking it, should I?
Right.
That we're really waiting for data on that. And
so
that will be out.
I love that you said if maybe what the president is thinking, that where I am and who I'm surrounded with, maybe it makes sense for me to take it, and so I'm going to ask my doctor. If you were his doctor, knowing his age and some of his medical health conditions and who he is, would you suggest he do it?
That's really a great question. There is no question he's in a high-risk group. Even though he appears overall healthy, I don't know his EKG results, but if you're overweight, that is a significant risk factor, and certainly age and male sex is a risk factor, so he definitely is high risk. He's surrounded by very close workers who have tested positive. I don't think it was really a crazy idea to take it. The next question is, okay, well, how long do you take it? What's the dose you take?
Right.
We don't really have that information. Studies are going on, but you're really guessing when you're dosing it as to what the right dose is and how long to keep someone on it. But in principle, it is not a crazy idea.
All right. Well, we hope you have a terrific weekend, Dr. Lustbader. Ian Lustbader, Clinical Associate Professor of Medicine, NYU's Langone Medical Center. And I will say, just to give him a shout out, he has been such a consistent voice for us in all of this. I really look forward to our conversations. I feel like I come out the other side smarter and really able to talk to people, because we're all talking about this all the time, Carol.
Correct.
And being able to convey some information, not just to our listeners, but even in my personal life. Very grateful to Ian for that.
Yeah, and I have to say, he's often given us a heads up on things that all of a sudden, like in a week or in a few days, are in everybody's headlines and in everybody's conversations. But I really do feel like he's been ahead of the curve, so really appreciate it. Dr. Ian Lustbader, Clinical Associate Professor of Medicine at Langone Medical Center, on the phone from New York City.
And not to mention the fact he's been on the front lines, so there's something to be said for that experience. Grateful to him for that as well. All right, let's get to Bob Moon now. Grateful for him. He's got world and national headlines. Hey, Bob.
Jason, thank you. Ahead of the Memorial Day weekend, President Trump is picking a fight with some states and their authority to limit gatherings to fight the coronavirus. Trump essentially says he'll be a higher authority as the faithful appeal to their higher authority.
Today I'm identifying houses of worship, churches, synagogue, and mosques as essential places that provide essential services.
Making the terse announcement at the White House, Trump took aim at governors who he says have wrongly barred religious gatherings and vowed if they don't abide by his request, he will, his word, override what he labels this injustice. It's the balance between freedom and public health that will be tested at the traditional start of the summer season, which has health experts and businesses concerned about a spike in cases, Bloomberg's Martin DeCaro reports.
After 2 quiet months, travel and tourism-reliant businesses are eyeing this weekend as the start of what's expected to be a slow recovery. That's if the act of fleeing home isolation for beaches and restaurants doesn't spread the pathogen anew. Well, it doesn't have to lead to disaster, says the nation's top infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Wear a mask, stay 6 feet away from anyone so you have the physical distancing, and go out. Go for a run. Go for a walk.
Memorial Day travel is still expected to be a fraction of previous years. The U.S. Travel Association forecasts consumers will spend just a third of last year's level. In Washington, Martin DeCaro, Bloomberg Radio.
California's latest count, virus cases up 2.6%. That's above its 7-day average of 3.7%. Global News 24 hours a day on air and on...
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Bloomberg and Eaton Vance.
This is a message from the government. There is new guidance to help businesses and employees who cannot work from home be COVID-19 secure at work. The advice will help you conduct a risk assessment, put social distancing measures in place, improve hygiene and cleaning in the workplace, and look after the well-being of your employees. Every workplace is different. Use the guidance to make your business COVID-19 secure. Access the support you need at gov.uk/working-safely. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Where do sports, culture, and basketball nostalgia collide? On their podcast, Knuckleheads, NBA veterans Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles sit down with athletes, musicians, and entertainers to get brutally honest, totally unguarded conversations about everything from current events to untold stories from the golden era of sports.
Shaquille O'Neal. You know that, right? I tried to tip dunk all the free throw line one time.
Search Knuckleheads on TuneIn to listen.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Connor to Fiala, he scores!
For
a limited time. It's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
Yeah, but it's unique times. I think there's unique circumstances, and we're trying to
standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind, giving up. I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn. And breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. The Dow lower, S&P little change. NASDAQ is higher. The volatility that has whipsawed investors all week shows few signs of abating. Today's volatility comes as traders brace for tension between Washington and Beijing to escalate after China announced plans to impose a national security law on Hong Kong. S&P up now by a point, little change to 29.49. NASDAQ holding on to that 29-point gain, up by 0.3%. And the Dow is down 62 points, a drop right now of 0.3%. 10-year up 4/30 seconds, yield 0.65%. Gold up 5/10, 17.35 the ounce. And a retreat today for West Texas Intermediate crude, down 1.8%, now at 33.31 a barrel. Recapping, S&P up by 1 point, up by less than 0.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. This story, Jason, is among our most read on the Bloomberg today. You and I were both he's rubbing his hands together because we're so excited to talk to Ashley Vance. It is in the magazine's double issue. It's online. It's a story that came out of a phone call from Elon Musk to Bloomberg Businessweek reporter and New York Times bestselling author Ashley Vance, who, of course, as you know, wrote a biography of Musk entitled Elon Musk, Tesla, SpaceX, and the Quest for a Fantastic Future. Ashley, also the host of Hello World. He joins us on the phone from Palo Alto, California. So Musk just called you up?
Yeah, we ever since my book came out, we've had a bit of a unusual relationship, sometimes talking, sometimes not, and it had been a while since we had any kind of really meaningful conversation, but there's this amazing moment that's coming up next week with SpaceX trying to launch astronauts to the space station, and I got a call from Elon on Sunday.
And Ashley, you do such a beautiful job setting it up, and I don't want to take. I'm not going to. I was going to read some of your best lines. I'm not going to read it out loud because people just have to go read it and have the whole experience that we got to have of like sitting and reading and just sort of being enveloped in this world. But the main point that you make at the top is that this should be a very straightforward, like, declare victory, patriotic moment, and you talk about like an immigrant launching people into space. This is what this whole country has been about, and yet it is so much more complicated, in part because Elon Musk himself is complicated. Help us understand why and what you really took from this conversation.
See, and I just wanted to know, did you wait, Elon, can I just get back to you? I'm a little busy right now. No, I'm just kidding. Answer Jason's question.
I mean, It is funny because, I was already working on an essay tied to this launch because it is this historic moment. We've been relying on Russian rockets for about 10 years to get humans into space, and obviously it's such a grim time with the virus that I wanted to write something about, look, humans can do a lot when they really put their mind to it. We all work together, SpaceX and NASA, the government and the private sector doing something good, and Elon had already started to complicate my piece because, for the last 2 or 3 weeks, he's been especially flamboyant on Twitter. He's pretty heavily in the COVID-19 truther camp. He's been fighting to open his factories when people have been saying maybe that's not the safest thing to do. And so yeah, it got really complex. I mean, here's this it should be just a super positive thing for humanity at a time when humanity as a whole is facing questions, and I think the U.S. obviously is as well.
Well, all right. I know Jason said he wasn't going to read a line, but I am, and I agree. Everybody has to read this. But you're right. So the moment of achievement is complicated, sort of like the right stuff meets the electric Kool-Aid acid test, where the idea that anything is possible is as unnerving as it is encouraging. Mind meld, Jason Kelly. It's such a great line, but it is significant. My dad was very involved in the space race back in the 50s, 60s, 70s. So tell us about this moment, and really, Elon Musk, really does stand at this moment of doing something incredible for our country, yet at the same time, right, he kind of complicates everything he does.
Yeah, I mean, it speaks to everything about Elon. I think, SpaceX, of all his businesses, is probably the most improbable, and yet it is ended up being the most consistent, reliable, and high-achieving of all his companies, so much so that NASA, which is this very traditional, risk-averse organization, is willing to put human lives atop a SpaceX rocket. If you're not a space nerd, it's kind of hard maybe to put what an unlikely achievement this is and how hard it was to do it. You just have the wrapper of Elon all around us. There was a day when he was firing off a ton of his tweets that he was going to sell off all his possessions, that we had to open the factories, and at that very same moment, NASA was having a press conference with Gwynne Shotwell, the president of SpaceX, talking about the launch, and so you have these such extreme things where this is not your traditional NASA rocket launcher who's just out there giving a vision of public safety and human well-being to everyone.
Right. And so we'd be remiss if we didn't ask you about some other sort of Muskian things, not the least of which is Tesla, because, despite everything, I mean, you go back and read sort of the headlines or a timeline over the past couple of years, this is a company that's had lovers and haters, and it feels like most people are sort of binary on this, both from an investor perspective and even from a personal perspective. And you have a great line where you talk about, defying especially when you look across his portfolio, like lottery-like odds to be successful here. Remind us of the Tesla piece of this, because in terms of influencing everyday life, he has had a massive influence there.
Yeah, I mean, on the, SpaceX is incredible. Tesla is a remarkable story as well. Without Tesla, I do not think most people would be talking about electric cars. And so whether you love Tesla or hate Tesla or think they're going to go bankrupt or turn a profit, I mean, the reality is that Elon shifted the car market to actually pay attention to electric cars and get consumers interested in them. In this particular story, Tesla is strange as a result of Musk's tweets, because a lot of people buy Teslas to kind of virtue signal that they care about the environment and they hope, humankind ends up in a better place. But because of Musk's tweets where he's been threatening to pull Tesla out of California and go to Texas, and he's been tweeting a lot of kind of alt-right stuff, he's suddenly now a poster child for conservatives and climate deniers as well. So it's a very strange situation.
What's also, and I love the way towards the end of your story, you talk about Musk's larger ambitions, which I think some people are like, okay, this is the crazy side of Elon Musk, building a human colony on Mars. But here we are with the pandemic and not quite sure about how this is all going to play out, or really what our future is when it comes to, devastating viruses, and the idea of an alternative planet to maybe go to, not such a crazy idea anymore.
Yeah, that's kind of the irony of it. When Elon uses people are like, why do you want to spend your money on SpaceX? He's like, well, humans might get wiped out one day, and we should have this backup plan. And people are like, whatever, man, you're crazy. Why don't you go do something else? And then, a plague hits the world, and then he's denying it. But this is kind of the reason SpaceX was started at the beginning. And so there's a lot of symbolism in two humans actually exiting the pandemic on a SpaceX rocket.
Yeah, well, it's amazing, and fortunate for us, you're in a position to take that call, Ashley Vance, and write about it for Bloomberg Businessweek.
Could you imagine if you missed it? Like you got your voicemail, and you're like, wait.
I bet they were going to connect. It sounds like he wanted to unburden himself. Ashley Vance, you're the best. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. Feature writer for Bloomberg Businessweek. His book on Elon Musk. It's a great quarantine read. So timely now, given everything that's going on. Well, if you are listening to us in New York, D.C., and San Francisco, watching on YouTube, Bloomberg Businessweek, it's going to continue right here. We got lots more to come, looking at the economy, looking at the hotel business, looking at the residential real estate business, and even private jets. If you're listening on Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, Bay State Business is coming up next. You're listening to Bloomberg Businessweek.
At the start of every day,
with the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunnin to Fiala, he scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic game replays to start listening.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
Yeah, but it's unique times. I think there's unique circumstances, and we're trying to
standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. The best sports story all day, 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week. ESPN Daily.
Search ESPN Daily to listen.
Hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We move into the final hour of trading on this Friday, May 22nd. We've got the S&P higher, the NASDAQ holding on to gains, Dow Jones Industrial Average declining, being weighed down by Caterpillar and Johnson & Johnson. 46-point loss right now in the Dow, down 0.2%. The S&P is up 2 points, up 0.1%. NASDAQ higher by 30, a gain there of 0.3%. Stocks have been fluctuating as the volatility that has whipsawed investors all week shows few signs of abating. The S&P, though, is on track for a winning week. Lots of questions about getting the U.S. economy reopened and how quickly that is likely to happen. We've got Diane Swunk, chief economist at Grant Thornton. She says you got to keep the economic damage in perspective.
Even as the economy reopens and we start to see percent increases out there, those will dramatically overstate the level of economic activity we're at. And that's what I'm very concerned about, because it doesn't do justice to the pain that is the ongoing that we continue to suffer.
Right now, we've got the 10-year up 430 seconds with a yield of 0.65%. Gold up 0.5%, 17.35 the ounce. Crude oil retreating by 1.7%, down 57 cents a barrel at 33.35. Hertz is in a race for its survival, facing a deadline of today in talks with a group of creditors. Sources say time is running out to cut a deal that addresses missed debt payments. Hertz shares, they're down now by 5.5%. A Rosenblatt analyst says Peloton offering a value bike for around $1,000 is an opportunity for the connected exercise company to grow its scale, citing comments from Peloton CEO stating that they have discussed launching a so-called value bike. Peloton shares, they're up now by 1.1%. Again, recapping, we've got stocks fluctuating, but higher right now as we begin the final hour of trading with the S&P up 2 points at 2950, up by about 0.1%. The Dow down 43, down 0.2. The Nasdaq Composite Index up 28 points for Nasdaq. That is a gain of 0.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, as Jason Kelly and I have been talking, it's been the world tour for Fed Chief Jay Powell. I believe, what do we call it? The Lending Not Spending Tour.
Lending Not Spending Tour, JP and the Feds.
We have heard from Jay Powell a lot over the past week, and he certainly has been reaching out, getting his message across. What does it all mean in terms of Fed policy? Let's get into that with Jeffrey Cleveland. He is chief economist at Payden and Regal. He joins us on the phone from Los Angeles. Jeffrey, great to have you back with us on Bloomberg Radio. First of all, tell us a little bit about your world out in LA. We know the world is slowly across the country reopening. How have you been impacted? What's going on?
Well, the work from home protocol is going pretty well. You know, I'm able to adjust quickly to that. I think the real downside here in LA, the weather's been beautiful the last couple of weeks, and only within the last week or so did they open up the trails here. I went hiking in the Santa Monica Mountains, which was great, and then down to the beach. You can, Carol, you can swim in the ocean, they said, and run at the beach, but you're not supposed to sit on the beach and gather in crowds. So it's a little bit limited. So,
all right, so some rules still, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, we're looking at high-frequency data. So if you're looking at L.A. public transit, you got a huge decline in activity, obviously, during March and April and into early part of May. But it looks like it's bottomed out. It looks like those high-frequency data measures have bottomed out. So if you want to find a silver lining, the April period was probably the worst, and we are starting to recover because things are reopening slowly.
And so that sort of data, those are the same sorts of things that the Fed is looking at, that Jay Powell and his team are looking at. What do you think are the most important data that they should be taking into consideration as they figure out what the rest of the ammo could be in their arsenal, and as they make recommendations around monetary policy, but also clearly influence the way we're all thinking about the economic landscape going forward, Jeffrey?
I think if you had to pick one, I would look at Thursday morning. I would look at the continuing claims, or the continued claims data, because that, for me, is in real time the best thing to look at. It's at 25 million as of yesterday's data, and it's, you know, continuing to rise. You want to see that plateau, and then you want to see that decline, because that would be a sign that the PPP program, for example, is working. People are being brought back on payroll. Right. People are finding employment, that we're reopening, and people are going back to work. So that's what I would watch. If that stays elevated or doesn't come down as quickly, I think then people might change their tune about the shape of the recovery here. It really all comes down to that. Are the people laid off? Are they permanently laid off? Are they temporarily laid off?
Well, what do you think? You know, Jeffrey, you've seen a fair amount of cycles. I mean, what do you think? Do you think it's going to stay elevated? We have lots of stories on the Bloomberg that say some of those temporary setbacks in the labor market will become permanent.
Yeah, I think the hopeful people, the optimists are saying, 80% are temporary, and then most of them, people will come back. I think it's much lower than that, Carol. I think maybe something closer to 60% are temporary and 40% are permanent. Because I think you are seeing a reallocation here, a restructuring of the U.S. economy and the global economy before the crisis and after the crisis. And so that will be different staffing levels. That will be different types of people needed. So you won't just have, you can't flip the lights on and then everyone goes right back to work as they were before. The world has changed.
Jeffrey, what do you make of all these discussions around some major demographic shifts and geographic shifts that we're hearing about? I mean, we're talking to you from the New York area. You're in Los Angeles. You know, you look up the coast from you to San Francisco. You know, these are all extraordinarily expensive housing markets. Now we are facing a situation where, you know, Mark Zuckerberg is saying 50% of Facebook employees may be remote in the next 10 years. Is that something that plays into how you think about the economy in the short and midterm?
Yeah, I think, the phrase I like, gradually then suddenly, I think there was a gradual sort of murmuring out there about remote work and distributed work, but I think there was reluctance. People were conservative, or there's this inertia in the management of firms, and they didn't want to go that route. And then a crisis happens, and then suddenly you have to experiment. And I can speak for our firm; it's gone really quite well. And so I think we've discovered through that process, hey, we can be very effective in communicating with clients, remotely distributed. So I think that trend now is accelerating. What does that mean? I think my bias for certain geographic areas that have really benefited from the concentration of capital and wealth. San Francisco would be a good example of that. Maybe that's been the peak, and now as people get more distributed, they'll filter out over the rest of the world. I think this is a good thing, though, for growth long term, because this opens up the avenue for talent from all over the world to be brought into the economy, and not just people who can make it and struggle in areas which are very expensive, like Los Angeles and San Francisco. So it's actually, long run, a very good thing.
Right. If you think about, how so many struggles, so many cities around the country have struggled, right? Because, people don't want to live there because there's nothing happening. But if you can live anywhere and still work for Google or Facebook or our company or your company, I mean, think about what that opens up. It would be pretty dramatic in terms of changes for our economy. Listen, we just have about a minute left. You mentioned about you can do some hiking, you can do some swimming. I did not know this about you, but you are a big-time open water swimmer. You have swam across the English Channel, the Catalina Channel, and you've also swam around Manhattan. I had no idea.
Yeah, 28 and a half miles around Manhattan, up the East River, across the Harlem River, if you can call it a river. I don't know. You tell me. And then down the beautiful Hudson, which was just great to finish down the Hudson. It was, I thought, the cleanest of the three. So, yeah, that took 8 hours and about 14 minutes. So those three together are considered the triple crown of open water swimming, and I did that. And at the time, I think, Carol, I was the 34th person to do it. There's been a few others that have joined that list now, though.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
That's incredible. I live about 2 blocks from the Hudson, a little further up in Westchester, and I have to say, it is quite a beautiful river, so I'm glad you got to experience it in a way very, very few people have. Jeffrey Cleveland, thank you so much. Great to spend some time with you here on a Friday. Chief Economist, of course, at Payton & Regal, joining us on the phone from Los Angeles. Carol?
I think his point about what this upends in terms of the workforce is huge, and might be a great way to really get more evenly distributed. We talk about the inequalities. What if you could just help rebuild cities around the country, around the world, right? By making it possible for people to kind of live anywhere.
Well, and also you think about the implications of those cities, Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, have in many ways become unattainable. You have a huge homeless problem in many cases because housing is unaffordable.
Right.
If housing comes down a little bit, and you're hearing some anecdotal evidence of this already, it's a game changer for sure. All right, let's get some world and national headlines now. Bob Moon is with us. Hey, Bob.
Jason, thank you. President Trump is putting pressure on some governors.
I call upon governors to allow our churches and places of worship to open right now.
President Trump speaking today at the White House. The president says he will order states to allow places of worship to reopen from stay-at-home restrictions imposed to combat the coronavirus outbreak, promising to override any governor who refuses without explaining what authority he had to do so. There's new research into the anti-malaria drug that President Trump has touted as a coronavirus treatment. Bloomberg's Nathan Hager reports.
President Trump got a lot of attention when he announced he's taking hydroxychloroquine.
The frontline workers, many are taking it.
I happen to be taking it. Now, a study published in the UK medical journal The Lancet looked at records from 15,000 patients who had taken hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine, either alone or with one of two antibiotics often paired with it. In any combination, the patients showed a higher risk of heart problems or death than 81,000 others who didn't take them. Up to now, only one drug, Gilead's remdesivir, has been shown to benefit COVID-19 patients in a clinical trial. Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
Free parking, but no valet service. Bartenders and blackjack dealers wearing masks. Hand sanitizer everywhere. And yes, dice will roll, cards will be dealt, and slot machines will beckon, but poker rooms will be closed. That's the story in Las Vegas this weekend. Global News, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Bob Moon.
The markets. No, you can't just run screaming from the room.
A lot of economists are just throwing up their hands and saying, we don't know.
But you don't have to manage this alone.
What are you looking at to give you some sort of compass through this period?
Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
What is your early read as to the scope and scale of this plan?
Bloomberg Markets. Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
You're living in a world built on science, political and economic.
You've got to believe the labor market gets hit.
Computer and medical.
Clarify where we are on a test.
It all makes a difference.
What do you think needs to happen in terms of governmental response?
And it's all here.
He expects the virus to peak quite a long time from now.
Get your science straight.
The hand washing campaign, is this actually a good strategy?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hi, it's Olivia Munn with my shelter pets, Frankie and Chance. Say hi, guys. When I adopted them, I discovered that they both have incredible personalities. Chance's sole purpose in life is to love and to be loved. Frankie is a little bit of a scoundrel and always entertaining. They're a little bit of a lot of things, but they're all pure love. Adopt pure love at theshelterpetproject.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council, the Humane Society of the United States, and Maddie's Fund.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting.
This is a message from the government. There is new guidance to help businesses and employees who cannot work from home be COVID-19 secure at work. The advice will help you conduct a risk assessment, put social distancing measures in place, improve hygiene and cleaning in the workplace, and look after the well-being of your employees. Every workplace is different. Use the guidance to make your business COVID-19 secure. Access the support you need at gov.uk/working-safely. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids. Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs.
Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
The NHL is always on the ice with these awesome hockey podcasts on TuneIn. Get your goal with the Spittin' Chicklets podcast.
Brian Yandel, Keith Yandel, thanks for coming on. What's going on?
Nothing much. Glad to be here. You guys got some nice digs here.
We heard you took Southwest 2-stop flight to get out here.
Yeah, well, just
carve up the ice with NHL at the rink.
The other day, I wrote a story. Artemi Panarin, Semyon Varlamov, Sergei Bobrovsky, they all helped arrange for the purchase of N95 masks to benefit hospitals in their respective markets. This is another one of those positive stories you're seeing.
Or create your own power play with Locked On NHL.
All these teams invested future assets to take a run at the Stanley Cup right now. Like, all of those teams would have a real serious gripe, like trading these multiple first-round picks to make a run at a cup. You're right.
Discover these and more NHL podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Okay, here we go.
With the NFL draft in the books and the schedule set, check out a TuneIn podcast for daily updates on the lead up to the 2020 season. Like the Ringer NFL show, where a rotating cast of Ringer experts talk with players, coaches, and special guests about the NFL landscape.
A lot of the other teams that we consider...
Or ESPN's NFL Live.
If there are some delays because of the COVID-19...
Search sports on TuneIn to explore these pods and much more.
Where do sports, culture, and basketball nostalgia collide? On their podcast, Knuckleheads, NBA veterans Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles sit down with athletes, musicians, and entertainers to get brutally honest, totally unguarded conversations about everything, from current events to untold stories from the golden era of sports.
Neil. You know that, right? I tried to tip dunk all the free throw line one time.
Search Knuckleheads on TuneIn to listen.
The Mina Kimes Show podcast.
Kevin Clark.
If Josh Allen became the 10th best quarterback in football this year, they'd probably win 14 games. Am I wrong about that?
No. If you as a quarterback can't win in the Bills' situation right now, they should not extend you. So many teams, Jets, do not have the information they need to evaluate their quarterbacks based on the teams they built around. The Bills do.
Listen and subscribe to the Mina Kimes Show podcast.
Search the Mina Kimes Show to listen.
Breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We're looking at a mixed Friday ahead of a long holiday weekend. S&P eking out a gain, the Dow lower, NASDAQ highs higher. Let's get the latest now from the First Word Breaking News desk. For your afternoon call, here he is, Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Charlie. That's right. U.S. stocks in a mixed trade today. Dow's currently down 63 points. S&Ps are a little change. NASDAQ higher by 23. The U.S. 10 yield at 0.66%. WTI crude futures are down 1.3%. Gold is higher by 8, and transports gained 19 points. Leaders to the upside in the Dow, Procter & Gamble and Travelers, while Chevron, Caterpillar, and J.P. Morgan led to the downside. After earnings in the tech space, chipmaker NVIDIA rose as much as 3.6% to a record high, and Splunk rose 12%, also to a record. Wrapping things up, dark pool operator LiquidNet is set to explore a $1 billion sale, and Moderna gained after positive comments from Dr. Fauci on NPR. Live from the First Word Breaking News desk, on Bill Maloney. Charlie?
Okay, thank you very much, Bill. Just getting word from the Department of Justice that a film producer has been charged with relief loan program fraud. Developing story. We'll have more details coming up. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg Type Squawk, SQUAWK on your terminal. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly, Carol Masser with you. Well, one of the tech companies beyond the borders of the United States that we care a lot about because it is a global juggernaut is Alibaba. Baba, B-A-B-A is the symbol there. Carol Masser. I know. I was just making sure you were paying attention. John Ehrlichman is with us, anchor of BNN Bloomberg's The Open correspondent.
John Ehrlichman,
for
do you
CTV
say it that way?
National News. Baba, right?
Baba, yeah. Baba Black Sheep. Well, I'm trying to remember the exact story behind that because Jack Ma, the entrepreneur founder, right, very, very high energy guy. We sometimes explore these stories of people on the Bloomberg Billionaires Index. I mean, he started this business in his apartment, and I remember he was looking for something inspiring, and so the story of Alibaba to this guy who who had no right to be building up a global juggernaut. He was a former English teacher who, saw the internet the same way Jeff Bezos saw the internet and saw an opportunity and built this thing. And, Jeff Bezos was like, hey, Amazon sounds like a cool name. And Jack Ma was like, you know what, Alibaba, that's an inspiring story. I'm gonna name it after that. But if Jason wants to call it Baba, whatever he wants to do, that's different.
It's the way he said it.
I just startled her because she was like doing some reading and not really paying attention to me. This is how our relationship works, Ehrlichman. So what do we need to know about Alibaba today? Because obviously it is subject to a lot of the vicissitudes, as they say, of this global pandemic. What did we learn about them? What did we learn about maybe the Chinese economy here?
I think I'll tell more through the lens of the investor story. And I think investors are having a hard time figuring out what they want to do with Alibaba because in a weird stock market where technology giants have generated so much interest and Amazon just continues to surge, investors are a little bit on the fence. I'm not saying Alibaba hasn't had a rally off those March lows, but it's still down on the year, and I think at the end of the day, it's that we have a little less awareness sitting here in North America of how the Chinese economy is truly performing right now. So, like, their revenue continued to surge, as is the case with so many of these companies that are digital first. But today was a day where the headline story initially coming into trading today was around how, the Chinese government wasn't going to stick with their traditional outlook for GDP, which I think tells you about we're just not sure where the economy there is going. I think that the environment is still set up that Alibaba is going to continue to gain retail dollars through all their various businesses, and they're growing grocery operations in the years to come. But it's a competitive environment. We're just coming through a situation here where Tencent, one of their rivals, put together a really good quarter as well, did really well in their gaming unit. Cloud is still a big business for Alibaba as well. So, they have kind of that Amazon feel in that they've got revenue coming from the e-commerce operations. They've got ad revenue coming in. They've got cloud businesses revenue coming in. But the first thing you said, Jason, was the China worry. I mean, totally. we don't even know what's going to happen with the listings for these companies based on some of the things we're hearing out of Washington, and they had to spend a good chunk of time explaining that today. So between the uncertainty of the Chinese economy and these tensions between the U.S. and China, I think it's a more complicated story for investors right now than say an Amazon is.
Yeah, it's interesting that, we've got a story too, as you know, John, on the terminal that says, Alibaba anticipates it can comply with U.S. securities rules to make sure it maintains its U.S. listing. That seems to be a big deal. I guess one of the things I like about whether it's an Amazon or an Alibaba, is what it tells us about what's going on in the Chinese economy, especially in a post-COVID-19 reopening world, and what that might portend for the global economy. We've got roughly about a minute left. Is there something we can take away from what we heard, John, from the company?
I think so, yeah. Like while the market seems reserved on these numbers today, they said that the trend still is in their favor, and I think that's true. You've heard that from all these companies. You've heard it from the likes of Shopify, for example, here in Canada. Don't forget, Alibaba works with a lot of small businesses in the United States as well, who are trying to ramp up with their own online operations. A lot of them sell through Alibaba. And so this world of moving towards online, we saw it in the retail sales number in the U.S. in April. I mean, we were verging on 20% e-commerce, which is unprecedented. That trend's not going away, Carol. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, it's really interesting to sort of look at the world through the lens of Alibaba in many ways, and a good reminder, as you say, that there are similarities but key differences there between the Amazon and Alibaba stories. John Ehrlichman, always a treat to catch up with you, and thanks for going with us.
Thanks for playing with us.
Came in goofy. You know how we roll. Baba. Anchor of BNN Bloomberg's The Open, correspondent for CTV National News, joining us on the phone from Toronto. I believe that is their ticker symbol, isn't it?
Baba?
B-A-B-A?
Yeah. The ADR? Yeah, Baba.
Yeah, so it's not that insane.
It was just how you said it. You're like, Baba. Baba.
Baba. Baba. Yeah, well, I am sitting in a 2-year-old's bedroom that broadcasting the show.
I don't think Alice would say it that way.
Yeah, she'd be like, it's Alibaba, Daddy.
Exactly.
Probably what she'd say. Jack Ma. She'd be like, Jack Ma.
Jack Ma.
In any case, a lot more ahead. We're going to talk a little Peloton. We're going to get to the close of trading for the week. We're going to talk about real estate. We're going to talk about private jets.
Sports.
Got a lot to do.
Yes,
Sports.
we do. Yeah, we're not done yet. You're listening to Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks remain mixed ahead of the long weekend. Investors are keeping a cautious eye on escalating tensions between the U.S. and China. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 39, the S&P 500 up 2 points, the Nasdaq up 27. The crisis in U.S. retail is showing signs of deepening as landlords send default notices to struggling tenants from department stores to restaurants. Many haven't paid rent in months. The default letters could push them toward bankruptcy or collapse. Still no sign of a deal between Hertz and its lenders hours before a deadline to cut a deal over missed debt payments. If the impasse cannot be broken, Hertz could be forced to file for bankruptcy. Evofem Biosciences is up nearly 4%. The FDA has approved its Phexxi birth control gel. It's the first non-hormone contraceptive to win approval in decades. Annual sales are expected to top $400 million by 2024. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
To protect her home and family in a disaster, Karen was willing to wade through water, mud, and insurance paperwork.
Yeah, I can do this.
You go, Karen! By simply understanding and updating what her insurance covers and doesn't cover now, she'll be better prepared no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
The world's financial decision makers connect on the Bloomberg terminal. The buy side and the sell side together, collaborating across markets and countries in real time, sharing ideas, negotiating trades, and forming an influential network of over 325,000 financial professionals that helps power global markets. Isn't it time you join them? Request a demo at bloomberg.com/professional.
It's a stock market driver.
Now they're starting to... This is an important update from the government about coronavirus. We all need to stay alert so we can control the virus and reduce the risk of infection. Staying alert means you must stay at home as much as possible. Work from home if you can. Limit contact with others. Keep your distance if you go out. And wash your hands regularly. Do not leave home if you or anyone in your household has symptoms. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Looking to freshen up your listening on TuneIn? Head to the homepage to discover something new. There you'll see custom recommendations based on your listening habits, along with new episodes of shows you've enjoyed in the past. Uncover your next audio obsession on the homepage.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunnin to Fiala. He scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic game replays to start listening.
Hey, y'all, we're taking the Marty Party to a whole new level with the Marty Smith's America podcast with Gerald McCoy.
I truly believe that Carolina made a mistake letting Cam go. This is not a personal shot at Teddy Bridgewater. This could have been Andy Dalton. This could have been whoever they brought in. Cam has so much left. Somebody's really getting a great one, man. And I don't think people really understand what they're getting.
Search Marty Smith America to listen.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
He does! Fabry wins it!
To standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
Round the Bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks, Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one, not only.
Catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn. Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Coming up, we're going to talk Peloton. $1,000 bike could be coming. This is Peloton's moment. Stock is up $45 a share. It's trading. Went public at $29. That and much more coming up. First to Charlie Pellet. Hey, Charlie.
Hello there, and here's what's going on. We've got 28 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. With the Dow, the S&P, both negative right now. Been that kind of a day for the S&P, fluctuating between gains and losses. But right now in the final half hour of trading, looking at red on my screen on the S&P. Stocks have been fluctuating as the volatility that has whipsawed investors all week shows few signs of abating. NASDAQ, by the way, up now by 17, up by 0.2%. The dollar is strengthening. S&P now back on the plus side by half a point. The Dow down 58, lower by 0.2%. Oil is sinking, down 1.5% on West Texas Intermediate crude as doubts emerge over the strength of China's economic recovery and as tensions between Washington and Beijing flare. Among some of the oil names today, ExxonMobil down 0.2%. BP is down about 0.6%, and shares of EOG Resources, they're down 0.8%, and Pioneer Natural Resources lower by 1.6%. 3:32 on Wall Street. Time now for the Small Business Report with John Tucker.
After starting his career in finance, Jimmy McDonald made a switch to small business entrepreneur. With his wife's staff, they created Authenticity 50, which makes high-quality sheets and bedding. As an internet-based business, they have survived during the pandemic. And Jimmy, tell us what sort of impact you've seen from the outbreak.
Yeah, there has been an impact, and in some ways it's been a positive one because, our message about community and supporting those around us really resonates with people, and we're putting our money where our mouth is in this process, and have been doing it since 2015. So the Made in USA aspect does resonate and has been positive. But there have been challenges. Some of our suppliers have had to temporarily close down their businesses due to COVID, and most are now up and running. Several of them have actually shifted pretty much all their production capacity to PPE fabrics, which we're very proud of and glad that they're doing.
Jimmy McDonald, owner of Authenticity 50, Made in the USA bedding and towels. Thanks very much. I'm John Tucker. That is your Bloomberg Small Business Report.
And we thank you very much, John. 27 minutes to go ahead of the close. S&P now flat. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Pellet. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate it.
We do. We both appreciate it.
So much.
So much, indeed. Listen, we want to get right to our next guest because this call crossed the Bloomberg terminal, and it comes from Bernie McTernan. He works over at Rosenblatt. He's an analyst, and he says the fitness and wellness company Peloton may be looking to make another version of its high-end bank. So Bernie joins us on the phone in Fairfield, Connecticut.
Did you say bank? Bike.
Bike. Did I say bike? Bank?
You said bank.
Oh, sorry. Well, maybe.
Maybe they're going to make bank on their new bike.
Maybe they're going to make bank on their new bike. It is definitely Friday. Bernie, thanks for your patience here. Tell us about your note here. And you specifically cite some comments from John Foley, Peloton's CEO, that they have talked about launching a value bike. What did you hear?
Yep, thanks for having me on. So there was an article that was published in Time Magazine, and it's talking about having a cheaper bike. And we already assume a cheaper treadmill comes in fiscal 22, which personally I think is a bigger opportunity than the value bike. But the conversation of a value bike is consistent with their recent discussion on affordability. And I think the reason why they're increasingly talking about affordability is because they've learned from the coronavirus is that their customer acquisition costs are just a lot lower than they originally anticipated. And they have a strategy where their net customer acquisition costs, so the gross profit that they make from selling the bike or the treadmill, goes into sales and marketing expense. And all of a sudden, they think they don't need to spend as much on sales and marketing, so that allows them to invest back in the business, and that means focus on affordability. And the reason why we like the stock so much is because of their subscription product. Once people become Connected Fitness subscribers, they don't churn off. Customer lifetime value is huge. So focus on affordability, increases the TAM, drives more subscribers.
Right, and that's really what this all comes down to. I mean, this is, and I know this is a tired metaphor, Bernie, but I'm going to use it anyway. I mean, this is razors and razor blades sort of 8.0, right? In the sense of once you get that bike, and full disclosure, I have one, Carol has one, and you really do get... it's hard to get rid of to some extent. You're not just going to be like, yeah, I'm going to send it back. I'm not really using it anymore. And you're going to keep paying for it. And it is, it's pretty reliable from a revenue stream perspective, I would imagine.
Yeah, and the two analogies that, and I completely get your razor and razor blade analogy. The ones that we like to use are comparing to Netflix and comparing it to Roku. So with Netflix, this is a business that really scales. And frankly, we also cover Netflix. We have a neutral rating on the stock. But with Netflix, it's, there's a lot of competition for their content. We have HBO Max launching next week. It's a bidding process for all the scripts. For Peloton, it's not that same way. And it doesn't matter for them if you have 1,000 people watching, a cycling ride or 1 million or 2 million, doesn't matter. So it's the same thing. So we think that there's the economies of scale akin to Netflix. And then also with Roku is interesting because, you're selling a device, and this is very similar to the razors and razor blades, but you're selling a device and then you're making, but the real reason is because of that, the ancillary revenues on top of it. So for Roku, it's advertising, but for Peloton, it's subscription.
Right. Well, Bernie, how much of, do you foresee too, and I think they're learning this because of COVID-19, not only is it having their specific pieces of equipment, but just tapping into a streaming world?
Yeah, well, I think one of the shifts that was happening before the coronavirus was the shift towards home fitness. There were things like Tonal and Mirror. Mm-hmm. Nike was coming out with an app too. So I think there was a shift towards home fitness coming anyways, and then all of a sudden trends just got accelerated. I don't know who's going to be, clamoring to go back to a SoulCycle or a Flywheel and be sweating, on the bike, 6 inches away from someone else. So I think Peloton already had an advanced business model just because there's not 50 people per class. There could be, 50,000 people in the class. So I think, tapping into those economics really is what makes the business model so attractive and why we think they'll be able to win long term.
Really quickly, 15 seconds, you've got a $56 share price target. Do you feel pretty conservative about that, or you feel pretty good with that for the next year? Just quickly.
I think there's still lots of leverage for them to pull to the upside where estimates can go higher from here.
All right.
Wow. Interesting. All right. Well, great stuff. Really interesting note. And it's a stock certainly we've watched very closely since the IPO. Love to keep in touch with Bernie McTernan. He is an analyst for Rosenblatt Securities. Joining us on the phone from Connecticut. Those comments that John Foley made in Time Magazine certainly driving some discussion about where this market will go. They've also got some competition coming up. We've talked about mixed fitness on this program before. Is that your dog?
Yeah, sorry. I have some chicken here, and she's just staring at it in a big way. All right, let's get to world and national news headlines. Let's check in with Bob Moon. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Carol. Some of the nation's governors might have to answer to a higher authority
when it comes to gatherings at places of worship starting this weekend. President Trump is that higher authority. He's threatening to override state leaders who don't abide by his request, although he wasn't clear today what authority he has to do so.
Some governors have deemed liquor stores and abortion clinics as essential, but have left out churches and other houses of worship. It's not right. So I'm correcting this injustice and calling houses of worship essential.
Trump made his announcement during a hastily arranged press conference at the White House where he did not take questions. He ignored a reporter who tried to ask whether he planned to go to church this weekend. Please, do I have your attention? Actually, it takes more than that to corral millions of pupils across the country these days. So are we learning any lessons from online schooling? Here's Bloomberg's Irv Chapman.
Some big city school systems have been handing out computers to pupils who need them. Former Education Secretary Arnie Duncan noted in a Bloomberg interview.
The idea that children can only learn when they're in a physical school building 9 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon just doesn't make any sense today. And children should be able to learn anything they want, anytime, anywhere, and have to have not just devices but access to hotspots and to Wi-Fi.
Duncan said conducting a lesson in front of a camera instead of a classroom is a skill that will have to become part of teacher education. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Bob.
What's the true value of your custodial relationship? Ben Harrison of BNY Mellon's Pershing explains.
As sophisticated investors demand more from their advisors, advisory firms, in turn, need to rely on their custodian to help them grow their complex businesses. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, supporting the rapid growth of RIAs is our number one priority. We understand what it means to deliver true value to our clients who are looking for a custodian that is aligned with their best interest and delivers high-value solutions, all in an open architecture environment with flexibility, choice, and transparency. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength, resiliency, and high-touch service that BNY Mellon Pershing provides. When you work with Pershing, we put your business first. Can your custodian say that?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Pershing Advisor Solutions, LLC. Member FINRA SIPC.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career?
This is a message from the government. There is new guidance to help businesses and employees who cannot work from home be COVID-19 secure at work. The advice will help you conduct a risk assessment, put social distancing measures in place, improve hygiene and cleaning in the workplace, and look after the well-being of your employees. Every workplace is different. Use the guidance to make your business COVID-19 secure. Access the support you need at gov.uk/working-safely. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
This is a message from the RNLI and Her Majesty's Coast Guard. Beach lifeguards can't be everywhere this summer, so they can't always protect your family, but you can. So keep an eye on your loved ones. Avoid taking risks in the sea. Don't use inflatables. In an emergency, dial 999 for the Coast Guard. Get more advice at rnli.org/beach2020. That's Thank you.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events. He does! Fabry wins it! To standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
The Woj Pod with Adrian Wojnarowski.
Doris, you had reason to believe that you needed to get a test for the coronavirus.
Right. Well, let's just start with the headline, which is I did test positive for COVID-19. I was so tired from Saturday the 14th through Tuesday, March 17th. I kid you not, I could not be out of bed for 5 minutes without needing to go back to bed and lay down.
Search the Woj Pod to listen.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of active
Round the Bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We've got 13 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. In fact, a long holiday weekend. S&P now higher by 3, up by 0.1% for these final few minutes this week. This is where it's gotten really interesting. Right now, the Dow is down 34, a drop there of 0.1%. NASDAQ up 26. That is a gain of 0.3%. Again, the S&P higher now by 4 points, up by about 0.1%. 10-year up 4/32 with a yield of 0.65%. Gold up 0.4%, 17.34 the ounce, and a retreat for West Texas Intermediate crude down 1.3%, 33.48 a barrel. Stocks have been fluctuating as the volatility that has whipsawed investors all week shows few signs of abating. Again, oil snapping a 6-day winning streak. WTI down now by 1.3%. S&P up 4. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no. Who's gonna drive you home?
Honey, please, I'll do the driving.
Drive on.
Excuse me, I want to drive.
Just drive, baby.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the drive to the close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
It is time for the drive to the close, getting ready to wrap up the trading day and the trading week before the long holiday weekend. Larry Pitkowski is back with us, co-founder and portfolio manager at Good Haven Capital Management, based in Millburn, New Jersey, and that's exactly where we find him on the phone on this Friday. Larry, nice to have you here. How are you doing?
I am doing fine, Carol. Doing okay. How are you doing?
We're doing okay. It's amazing. Week 10, and it's pretty remarkable of the folks that we talk to, and a lot of people are working and doing their thing. That's certainly, we know, unfortunately not the case for everyone, but moving along. And it's been an interesting week where we saw some enthusiasm come back into the equity markets. We continue to hear a lot from the Federal Reserve overall, and certainly the Fed Chief Jay Powell. What are you noticing that's kind of interesting in the trade, and maybe what you're hearing from some of your clients?
Well, it's been a very unusual period, Carol. Our modus operandi over all the years at Goodhaven and in my prior life was to, be very aggressive investing when there's severe downturns and market volatility and panic selling and the things that we saw in March. And I was aggressive in March. We probably put about, 30-40% of our cash to work during those really dark days of market volatility. And now you've had prices lift substantially in some areas, and you've had credit markets much improved. And I think you've shifted now from will the economy and will the credit markets and banking markets, will everything function normally? And now you're asking the question of what are certain companies going to earn over the next 6 to 24 months, which is a lot harder. So I think you've taken the fear of a lack of functioning of a lot of important parts of the system. You put that over to the side thanks to the very strong efforts of the Federal Reserve and Congress and the White House. And now you've got to sift through as an investor and try and see if you are comfortable looking a bit forward. And some industries are relatively straightforward, but lots of others, it's a bit of a wild card.
Yeah. So, Larry, walk us through some of that. I mean, obviously you were making some initial bets, as you say, during a very dark period of time when most people were certainly running the other way. You were running into this market, which is noble and probably paid off quite well for you, as you alluded to and as Carol alluded to in terms of where the markets are today. How has your thinking evolved in terms of who may come out of this, either in terms of individual names or in terms of sectors, now that we are starting to at least get some sense of the shape of the recovery?
Well, I think as I was looking at purchases to make during that period, and I'm not as young as I look or sound, so I've seen my share of downturns. But I think what was most unusual about this one, and it is nothing that's been seen before by anybody, is to have a cessation of such a large part of the economy makes forward thinking very difficult for lots of industries where some of the potential bargains are. And so, there were lots of industries where they're relatively straightforward, but that's not where the potential opportunities may have lied. For instance, in the financial sector during March, I think there was a bit of a view that a lot of the alternative asset managers who had some leverage within their investment portfolios would be in for a very difficult period and might have some real problems. We had our eye on KKR for quite some time. At Goodhaven, we like to buy good businesses run by talented management teams where the management teams have skin in the game. And, KKR has built quite a machine. Assets under management are $207 billion. They've grown at about 17% a year since 2005. The employees and the management own about 40% of the company. They've grown book value at a very nice clip, I think about 10% a year since 2009. And as the shares really cascaded all the way down to the mid-teens, we use that as an opportunity to make some purchases, which I think, they've already worked out fine, but I think they'll work out very well over time, and I think it's still interesting.
Well, and it's interesting about KKR, and keep me honest here, Larry, one of the differentials, I believe, between them and their competitors like Blackstone and Carlyle is that they are more aggressive or sort of structurally able to use their balance sheet, right, in a different way than some of those other names are.
Yeah, Jason, I think that's a great point. I mean, they have become more focused on growing book value, and they've been very articulate about that. And, it's interesting. We own some Brookfield Asset Management, which we own because we own some Oaktree, and it got bought by Brookfield. And Brookfield came at their current business structure being a grow book value for the owners and then build an asset management business. And KKR has come at it from have an asset management business and then focus on growing book value. And, they've got, I think, one of the executives said on the recent call, they've got something like 80% of the assets are locked up for 8 years or longer. And so they're focused on it, as you said, in a different sense. But you've got a great underlying business. You've got people that seem to be very talented investors. They've got skin in the game, and they are focused on growing book value. And they have been very active. I think they put, $8 billion to work, probably more by now, during, let's call it, March and April, including a substantial amount in the credit market. So we think that will serve owners well over time.
Is there anything you would not buy in particular in this market environment?
That's a hard question, Carol. I mean, there's always things. I think you just have to look at something and see if you can come up with some reasonable range of estimates about what you think the future looks like, and then how does that stock price or bond price compare with what you think the company is worth? And there's always things where you just, it belongs in the too hard pile. You just can't figure it out, or you think the price is no bargain, or you think it's too dangerously leveraged, or there should be very few things, even during a downturn. You've always got to be very picky. There should be very few things you're willing to do. You should pretend you've got a limited number of decisions you can make in your investment lifetime, and it will serve you better. You'll make fewer, and hopefully they will be of better quality.
All right, we're going to leave it there. I hope you have a nice long holiday weekend. Larry Pitkowski, co-founder, portfolio manager of Good Haven Capital Management, joining us on the phone from Millburn, New Jersey. He had me at KKR, Carol. I mean, such an interesting exploration.
I picked up my knitting at that point because I knew you were gone for a while.
You're like, hey, Scout, do you need some chicken, or can you bring me some chicken?
Just don't touch my avocado, Scout.
There you go.
Just going to say. Great conversation, very thoughtful, and I think he, along with a lot of others during that downturn, were finding great opportunities, and people did a lot of buying. And
that took an iron stomach, though, I have to say. I mean, you knew it was the right thing to do.
Markets go up, markets go down, Jason Kelly. You know that. You know that. All right, stick around, folks. Just a few minutes away from that closing bell. We'll count you down to the bell.
Business is like a puzzle. Can you make a... Right now, we're all depending on the digital world that little bit more. And Barclays Digital Eagles are here to help everyone develop the skills they need. From T&Teach, supporting those who are new online, to Code Playground, teaching kids how to code. Since 2013, we've been helping everyone develop digital skills. And now more than ever, we're here to help. To find out more, search Digital Eagles. Barclays, we're working to make money work for you.
This is a message from the government. There is new guidance to help businesses and employees who cannot work from home be COVID-19 secure at work. The advice will help you conduct a risk assessment, put social distancing measures in place, improve hygiene and cleaning in the workplace, and look after the well-being of your employees. Every workplace is different. Use the guidance to make your business COVID-19 secure. Access the support you need at gov.uk/working safely. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistant systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. Visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Thanks to National Lottery Players, the Help a Squaddy initiative, and now providing mental health support online for veterans like Darren.
Thank you.
And £600 million of National Lottery funding is on its way to thousands more local projects in England and across the UK during these exceptional times.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
Get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs.
Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. There you have it. Sound of the closing bell at the New York Stock Exchange, being rung in honor of Memorial Day and lives lost in military service to our nation, and it is on to a long holiday weekend. Mixed day, lots of cheers with the Dow Jones Industrial Average closing at just about the best level of the day, down 9 points, a drop there of 0.04%. S&P up 6 at the close, higher by 0.2%. NASDAQ rallied 39 points, higher by 0.4%. Stocks fluctuated for much of the session as the volatility that has whipsawed investors all week showed few signs of abating. The dollar strengthened. Oil snapped a 6-day winning streak. West Texas Intermediate crude ending the week at about $33.50 a barrel, down today by 1.4%. Now, as for the overall market backdrop, Larry Pitkowski is co-managing partner at Goodhaven Capital Management. He was our guest moments ago right here on Bloomberg Business Week.
I think you've shifted now from will the economy and will the credit markets and banking markets, will everything function normally? And now you're asking the question of what are certain companies going to earn over the next 6 to 24 months, which is a lot harder.
S&P 500 index did trade within a narrow range today after slumping as much as 0.5%. Again, ended the day with a gain of 0.2%. Caterpillar and Johnson & Johnson weighed on the Dow Jones Industrial Average. After earnings, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise advanced today by 2.9%, and Nvidia shares fell 11.4% after delivering a quarterly revenue forecast that was in line with analyst estimates, helped by a surge in spending on internet infrastructure and purchases of computer gaming gear. And to be clear, it was Nvidia that was up 2.9%. HPE, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, plunging today by 11.4%. Again, recapping here, stocks did advance with the S&P 500 index up by almost 7 points, ending the week heading into the weekend at 29.55. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Your next move will be your last.
Nobody move a muscle.
Damn, Sippy, you got some moves. And I'm moving on from town to town.
Time is money. Let's go. Come on, move it.
Shake it up. Shake it up.
Bloomberg Business Week, Movers and Shakers, with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody, time to take a look at some of the stocks on the move. Really get the big picture here, if we may. And let's start with the S&P 500. I've been crunching some numbers here, Jason, just to get an idea of how much we've bounced back, where we are for the year. But let's start with Friday, ahead of the long weekend. So S&P 500, a little bit of an even split, but a little bit more of a bullish tone here. 274 names in the S&P 500 higher today, 231 lower. And if I take a look at the major industry groups, real estate, your top performer, up more than 2%. Utilities were up about 1%. Bottom of the pack, though, financials and energies, they were down just a hair. And I was looking at the week overall in terms of the major equity averages. We did see a rally in stocks. So up 3.3% on the Dow, up more than 3% on the S&P. NASDAQ up almost 3.5%. We are now, for the S&P, and both the Dow actually, we're up 32% from that low March 23rd. We're up 36% on the NASDAQ from that March 23 low. We're up 4% on the NASDAQ for the year. We're still down about 9% on the S&P for the year. So quite a rally from the lows. Definitely have bounced back big time. And we definitely had more of a bullish tone this week.
Right, exactly. And, and hearing from Larry Pitkowski, and, you chastise me about not remembering that stocks go up and down. But listen, those were dark times. I mean, in the middle of March there. And I think, it's interesting, too, to think about how dark it got toward the end of March and even early April when we started to get a sense of how long this lockdown was going to be. And I think you mentioned this when we were talking about some of the retail names and the defaults that are happening there, and landlords essentially saying, hey, listen, I need to get paid. I think we really thought, okay, this, as you said, this is going to be a few weeks and then people are going to get back to business and it'll be fine. They just need to keep some people on payroll. They need a little bit of wiggle room, maybe a month to not pay their rent, maybe a couple months, but now it's going to be June 1st in 10 days.
Yeah, exactly. And the problem is, and we've done a lot of stories today about the jobs that come back may be very different from the jobs that we had pre-COVID-19. The other thing is the economic momentum is not going to be there, even as places open up. You and I have talked about this. If you have a restaurant opening, but it's operating at 50% capacity, if you have a hotel that's operating at partial capacity, it's not going to be the same revenue stream. It's not going to be the same earnings stream as well. And so it's going to be a different economy that we come back to, and we need to remember that. And that's, when the market swings were pretty dramatic, you knew on your logical, your part of your logical, thinking was like, okay, this doesn't make sense. The world is not completely coming undone. But we do know it's going to be different. And as we've talked with Carl Riccadonna and his team, it's going to take a few years for the economy to get back to potentially where it was before the virus shut down.
And so what do you do if you want your stock to come up? You lean a little bit on Kylie Jenner. That's what Cody did, and they are the number one gainer in the S&P today. They're bringing Kylie Jenner's cosmetics line to Europe. Of course, Kylie Jenner, part of the Kardashian family. She is the youngest self-made female billionaire. True.
Wait, self-made with quotation marks around it.
Well, I mean, she created a company that she sold to Cody for a lot of money.
But if she wasn't known, thanks to the reality show and her mom really pushing them, would we buy her cosmetics?
Okay, so do you want an asterisk beyond this that basically says youngest mom-made?
There's a footnote. There's definitely a footnote. Yes, mom-made. Mom-made. And Cody is still down 67%. So there's still a lot of questions about, on the other side of this.
Why you're hating so much? I'm just saying that, they're taking Kylie Jenner to Europe. The stock is up. It's the best performer here on Friday. You're dissing Kylie Jenner. She was part of the Bloomberg 50.
Not dissing
we celebrated
her.
her
I'm just saying, let's be realistic. She's not an Elon Musk.
She says a mom-made. The youngest mom-made female billionaire. All right. Any other names you want to talk about?
Did we mention HPE? Because that was your number one decliner in the S&P 500. We were breaking down their earnings yesterday because we got them after the closing bell. And that stock definitely took a hit. It was down in today's session, as we mentioned, the number one decliner in the S&P. And some concerns, about the quarter, the outlook. Let me just take a look here. HPE was down more than 11%, right? I just think it's uncertain times for all of these companies.
Yeah, interesting. Your second worst performer on the S&P, Wynn Resorts. The CFO sold about $500,000 worth of stock, and the market essentially said, our favorite phrase of the week, come on, man.
Come on,
so
I really
they sold off as well. I mean, that stock already, owing to a complete lack of travel going on globally, that stock is down about 44% for the year already.
I want Lending Not Spending, that T-shirt, the Jay Powell World Tour.
I designed it. We're going to make it.
And then I want the Come On Man.
Come on, man. Maybe that can be part of the same T-shirt.
Could it?
Come on, man. Yeah, listen. You can design a T-shirt with whatever you want on it. One interesting name, just going back to the conversation that we had with Tom Ehrlich earlier about the importance of China, and even our conversation about BABA with John Ehrlichman, I'm going to make BABA a thing, is Agilent, a big semiconductor maker. They are up owing to some positive comments that they made about their performance in China. That's one of your best performing names there.
All right, let's talk about the volatility index report, especially when we've seen a week where stocks have rallied. You would expect the VIX to back off, and it indeed did. It's down about 4.7%, so down, Jason, roughly about 1.4 points. The VIX closing at 28.13. So, yeah, I mean, more of a risk on trade. I think the big thing is starting with Jay Powell on 60 Minutes almost a week ago saying, basically, we've got your back. We're not out of ammunitions, and that's what you want to hear. And I really do think he's been one of the incredible calming voices during this whole process.
Certainly, heard a lot about him this week, that's for sure. Yeah, and interesting, the VIX, it's staying below 30 as we go into the week. It peaked above that earlier in the week, but below 30 feels a lot better than where we were for some time there when it was into the 50s and 60s and above. So lots more to come. We're going to talk a little bit about the luxury real estate market. Yeah. We're going to talk a little bit about private jets. So all that ahead. Lots to do.
All right. First up, let's get back to world and national news headlines. For that, let's turn things over once again to Bob Moon. Hi, Bob.
Carol, it is the investigation that President Trump still denounces as a witch hunt. FBI Director Christopher Wray has ordered an internal review into possible misconduct in what's become known as the Russia investigation involving former Trump administration National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. The review will examine whether any employees engaged in misconduct during the course of the investigation and evaluate whether any improvements in FBI policies and procedures need to be made. President Trump says he has deemed churches and other houses of worship essential and is calling on governors to allow them to reopen this weekend, that despite the threat of the coronavirus. Heading into the Memorial Day weekend, President Trump hosted bikers and veterans today, marking Rolling to Remember, a demonstration honoring U.S. veterans, prisoners of war, and those missing in action.
Thank you for keeping this noble tradition alive and for preserving the memory of those who are missing, but never forgotten, never forgotten.
You're likely to see flags at half-staff this weekend before Memorial Day. From Washington, Bloomberg's Amy Morris explains why.
President Trump says U.S. flags will be flown at half-staff today, tomorrow, and Sunday as the death toll from COVID-19 in the U.S. surpasses 95,000 people. The president tweeted yesterday the flags will be lowered on all federal buildings and national monuments nationwide in the memory of the Americans who were lost. He says the flags will continue to be flown at half-staff on Memorial Day in honor of those in the military who died serving the country. In Washington, I'm Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Bob Moon.
Why can't you just go to some remote island and wait till all this is over?
The range of outcomes is so wide.
Because it's your job.
What do you think some of the structural changes might result?
Fortunately, it's our job too.
How's the value done in this market?
Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz.
It's very hard to make a forecast.
Bloomberg Markets.
This could be a lower for longer type of hit.
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
You took the first step and quit smoking, but even former smokers may still be at risk for lung cancer. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know about a new low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early. It takes only 60 seconds and could save your life. You took the first step, now take the next. Visit SaveByTheScan.org for a simple quiz to see if you're eligible and talk to your doctor about screening. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
At Bloomberg, we know a lot of financial experts.
He's a former president of the European Central Bank.
Your Global Financial Warriors is a classic textbook.
A lot of political experts.
If you were advising the President of the United States, what's the thing that he's not doing that he should do?
And lucky for you, we know a lot of science experts, too.
You talked about those reagents which are necessary for the testing.
It's also the behavioral psychological approach.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hi, I'm your host, Smokey Cole Bear, filling in for Smokey because after 75 years of...
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Turns out there's much more to say. Nearly 90% of wildfires are caused by us humans being careless, dumping our used barbecue coals willy-nilly. Guess the song was wrong. We did start the fire. That's why I respect Mother Nature and her trees, whether coniferous or new car scented. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the ad.
This is a message from the government. There is new guidance to help businesses and employees who cannot work from home be COVID-19 secure at work. The advice will help you conduct a risk assessment, put social distancing measures in place, improve hygiene and cleaning in the workplace, and look after the well-being of your employees. Every workplace is different. Use the guidance to make your business COVID-19 secure. Access the support you need at gov.uk/working-safely. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
You love TuneIn for live-breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Behind the highlight reels, championship rings, and colossal paychecks, there are sports stories that fuel, deepen, and even challenge our love for the game. For true tales of underdogs, anti-heroes, and game-changing innovators, explore a sports documentary on TuneIn, like Sports Wars, telling the origin stories of classic rivalries, Raise Sports, about the concussion crisis that threatens football's future, and Dunkumentaries, a podcast devoted to the beauty and power of the slam dunk. For these and more, search sports documentaries on TuneIn. Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in a front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I jumped high school here in New York.
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Okay, here we go.
With the NFL draft in the books and the schedule set, check out a TuneIn podcast for daily updates on the lead up to the 2020 season. Like the Ringer NFL Show, where a rotating cast of Ringer experts talk with players, coaches, and special guests about the NFL landscape.
A lot of the other teams that we consider...
Or ESPN's NFL Live.
If there are some delays because of the COVID-19...
Search sports on TuneIn to explore these pods and much more.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
At Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pelletier. Decidedly winning week for the U.S. stock market. Turned out to be a mixed Friday. Let's begin there with the Dow dropping 9 points. Little changed on the day. S&P was up 6, higher by 0.2%. NASDAQ held on to a 39-point gain, up today by 0.4%. On the week, S&P up 3.2%. The Dow up 3.3% this week. NASDAQ had a 3.4% gain this week. Stocks rallied into the close of trading after whipsawing investors during a volatile week that featured optimism over the reopening of the economy and a renewal of trade tensions. S&P, as I mentioned, up 0.2% today. The 10-year up 4/32 with a yield of 0.65%. Gold up 0.5%, $17.35 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude down 55 cents a barrel, down 1.6%. $33.37 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week on this Friday. Carol Masser along with Jason Kelly. So yesterday, Jason, we talked about a great story by our own James Tarmy. It was about the winners and losers when New York City's luxury housing market reopens. Now, one of the best individuals to talk about New York City real estate is Jonathan Miller. He is president and CEO of the real estate appraisal and consulting firm that he co-founded, Miller Samuel. He joins us on this Friday on the phone from Connecticut. Jonathan, so nice to have you here with us. How are you doing in all of this?
Just other than being stir crazy, I'd like to answer the phone saying I'm living the dream in quarantine, but I'm really not being truthful. So
yeah,
that's where we're at.
And so how has it affected sort of your daily routine? Because, I think about someone in your business, and this is similar for us too. We're in the business of people. We're in the business of talking to people and meeting with them.
Right.
I do wonder, what's the rhythm like for you?
Well, it's very difficult because we have Miller Samuel's an appraisal company, so we go into properties for a living. That's what we do. And since the outbreak or the crisis, my staff, we're essentially working with the banks and doing what we call desktop appraisals, where you're sitting at your desk, just like it sounds, or drive-bys if it's in the suburbs where you can go through the neighborhood, but you don't physically go into the property. You can walk around it. And it's very odd, and it's temporary, but it's so different because what we do is we interact with people, and you get feedback from different participants, and it's usually just it's casual, and there's none of that now. It's just very regimented and isolated.
Well, and how much are people reaching out to you to say, wait, we need an appraisal? I'm just curious about what kind of demand there is right now.
So more than half of our company's business relates to the courts. Mm-hmm. We do lots of valuation for estates and trusts and matrimonial. And the courts are closed for new cases. They're just starting to talk about opening. So that's been a significant hit to our business. And then we do a lot of appraisals for banks, but at least from our perspective, and they tend to be jumbo type mortgage loans. So a lot of the lending in that space is more to existing clients because they're holding the loans in portfolio, and and even with rates dropping, there hasn't been that much activity other than dealing with existing clients. So for us, we're way down, but we're optimistic that once things start to slowly, and I hope slowly, open up, that we're probably going to be really busy for the next 3 or 4 years with all sorts of sort of negative, divorce and bankruptcy and workouts and foreclosures. There's going to be a lot of that residual, I think, with the damage done to the economy.
Right. So in the short term, Jonathan, we hear, we look at the data, we hear some anecdotal evidence, and would love some anecdotal evidence and data driven from you about what people are doing in terms of buying and selling, especially as you look across the tri-state area. And this is especially as you look across Manhattan, because we're so interested to know what's going to happen right now and what's going to happen in the short and midterm to New York City.
Sure. Yeah, so the takeaway really on the housing market, and the word anecdotal, I think, is, and I like to say that the plural of anecdotal is not data, and we have lots and lots of anecdotal. But the reality is that what we've learned in a crisis that unfolds on a daily basis, that even contract data, which you would think would be very fresh, literally lags the moment where the buyer and seller sort of agreed to the price and it's handed off to the attorneys. But there's so much going back and forth that attorneys are telling me it's taking an average of about 4 weeks for a written contract to be created. So even contract data is lagging, the actual market. And most of the closing data points that we have really reflect pre-COVID conditions because the many of the closings that occurred over the last couple of months have been because the buyers, there's definitely on the margin, we're seeing buyers buying property without physically inspecting, but virtual, the whole Zoom and FaceTime is not replacing the actual inspection. You're seeing a little bit more traction on the rental side because it's a smaller transaction for a shorter period of time, but you're really not seeing this wholesale sort of adoption of virtual for real estate because of the dollars that are involved. So as a result, a lot of transactions that are closing, when you drill into them, you find out that the buyer had looked at it, say, in February, and then sort of backed off and was looking at something else, and that fell through, and they came back, and they were willing to sign a contract or close because they had been in it, but that was supplemented with virtual tours and that sort of thing. So we literally, I think a lot of that changes once the brokerage community is allowed to physically show property in New York. And what we've seen in the outlying boroughs, like in New Jersey, we're seeing they lifted that, and there's been a boom in contract activity.
Right, and activity we're starting to see come back. We're going to continue this conversation. We're talking with President and CEO of the real estate appraisal and consulting firm, Miller Samuel. We're talking about Jonathan Miller. He is on the phone in Connecticut, so we'll continue our conversation. I've got a lot more questions, certainly,
totally.
Based on some of the stories, Jason, we've been talking about all week. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. It was an indecisive day on Wall Street. Traders kept a wary eye on U.S.-China tensions heading into the long weekend. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 9. The S&P 500 gained 7. The Nasdaq Composite climbed 40. This weekend marks the start of prime season for theme parks and amusement parks, but analysts say they could lose 75% of their normal revenue this summer. The window to salvage an ugly year is narrowing by the day. Southwest Airlines could see its first involuntary job cuts ever without a strong pickup in travel demand this summer. CEO Gary Kelly expects capacity later this year to be down 30% from 2019, possibly leaving Southwest overstaffed. One airline that is growing doesn't carry passengers at all. The DePaul University study expects Amazon's Prime Air to have about 200 planes within 8 years, creating an air cargo service that could rival UPS. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions. COVID-19.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs. Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
First, we're told that masks don't work. Then, we're told to wear them all the time. One week, we hear that the mortality rate is 2%. The next, well, who knows? In the time of COVID-19, there is so much uncertainty, and so much scientists are learning in real time, along with the rest of the world. So it's hard to know what you can be sure of and what's still a big question mark. Enter podcast Podcast 19 from 538, where we'll explore the evidence behind the science in our fight against coronavirus. I'm science journalist Anna Rothschild. Each week, I'll investigate coronavirus mysteries, keep track of the latest developments on vaccines and treatments. Oh, and I'll try to edit out all the times I shush my family since I'm recording this thing from the chaos of my home.
Search Podcast 19 to listen today.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
Round the Bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn. With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
Yeah, but it's unique times. I think there's unique circumstances, and we're trying
to stand out stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week on this Friday. Carol Master along with Jason Kelly. We're going to get back to our conversation with Jonathan Miller of Miller Samuel, talking about the high-end luxury real estate market and what he is seeing. First up, though, let's get back to your top business stories. Once again, here is Charlie Howard.
Thank you very much. Turned out to be a winning week for the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ. Let's begin with a weekly recap. On the week, S&P was up 3.2%, Dow up 3.3%, NASDAQ this week up by 3.4%. It was a mixed Friday, however. The Dow lower, a little change, down 8, a drop of less than 0.1%. S&P up 6, a gain of 0.2%. NASDAQ up 39, higher by just about 0.4%. Stocks did rally into the close of trading after whipsawing investors during a volatile week that featured optimism over the reopening of the economy, along with a renewal of trade tensions. And that's where we stand heading into the long holiday weekend. As for the overall market backdrop, Alicia Levine is Chief Strategist for Investment Management at Bank of New York Mellon.
The equity markets are telling you, in the way that the other asset classes are telling you, that the demand really may not be there the second half of the year, and that the recovery is still questionable, less likely to be V-shaped, and that is the narrative.
Crude oil fell 1.6% today. West Texas Intermediate crude down 55 cents a barrel at 33.37. Oil sank as doubts emerged over the strength of China's economic recovery and as tensions between Washington and Beijing flared. Among some of the oil names that we follow closely, ExxonMobil eked out a gain of less than 0.1%. BP down 0.6%, talking about the London shares. Shares of EOG Resources down 0.1%, and Pioneer Natural Resources lower today by 0.6%. The 10-year, the yield there, 0.65%. Gold up 0.5%, $17.35 an ounce. Recapping winning week, up Friday, S&P up 6, up by 0.2%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Let's get right back to our conversation with Jonathan Miller, President and CEO of Miller Samuel, joining us on the phone from Connecticut. So, Jonathan, you're in Connecticut. I'm in Westchester. We're talking a lot about the burbs these days. Is the move for real? Is this shift something that we're just talking about, or is it already starting to happen?
It's already starting to happen in a limited way. The initial, as we went into the crisis in mid-March, there was a flurry of rental inquiries for single-family homes in Westchester and Fairfield specifically. I know in Greenwich, Connecticut, back in March, I looked and the year-over-year number of single-family rentals had tripled. Wow. The problem is that there's not a lot of single-family rental product, and certainly somebody who's in a condo in the city that's looking for, maybe a low-density, look in the suburbs isn't going to rent in a condo. So as the sales or the rental inquiries were, really thwarted by the lack of product, we are seeing a lot of contracts or, a lot of buzz around properties. And what's particularly interesting is, and I was saying in the other segment, is that in New Jersey, we saw brokers allowed to show property, which is not yet happening in New York State. Right. And as a result, there has been a flurry of contract activity in the suburbs that even with that flurry, we're looking at May contract activity for the first half of the month is still down something like 50%. Wow. So, but you are seeing an uptick. It's just in inquiries for the suburbs. I think part of it is everybody's been cooped up and they're looking for space, alternatives, right? I mean, yeah.
And outside space. My daughter goes to school in the high school in the city. We live just outside New York City, and a classmate of hers who also lives just outside New York City in a high rise, just before the lockdown, rented a house out in New Jersey just so they weren't stuck in their high rise through all of this. So what does this mean, John, for prices in New York? Percentage-wise, how low do you think prices might go, though? Do you or what kind of pressure do you anticipate?
So that's always the billion-dollar question, right? What will be the financial impact? And at this point, we literally have no, substantial or really even nominal price evidence. What we're seeing on the deals that were pre-COVID that ended up closing, we're seeing, and this is anecdotal, is we're seeing somewhere between 5 and 7%. The way I look at it right now, and I should qualify that and say, half the deals that I'm hearing about, there was no discount, and half it was somewhere between 5 and 7 on average. So, for the look of it, I think that the real sort of price discovery period is going to be when the real estate community is able to physically show property. Right. Then I think the market will end up being a lot more active and transparent.
But are you nervous about the stories that we're hearing about the big banks and how they're saying, listen, we're moving people to the suburbs, and that's not just maybe, that's what we're going to do. That's got to impact what we're seeing in terms of, or will impact New York real estate.
Yeah, so, one of the challenges of the outlying suburbs, I'm being told by commercial brokers, is they don't have the same availability of Class A office if you have somebody in a Class A office in New York. The other thing is, having been through a few cycles in the 34 or 5 years I've been tracking the market here, is after 9/11, there was the same outbound migration to the suburbs, whether it was business or consumers, and that outbound only lasted about 3 years, and then it reversed. So I'm all in terms of, we are seeing this outbound and the inquiries, but I'm not all in that this is a permanent structural change, that the city is going to end up having, a shadow of its former self in terms of occupants. But we are going to see a lot of changes with the virtual, the ability. We had millions of people working remotely right now, and it kind of works.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a lot of rethinking. And one of the things that applies to residential is that
just got about 30 seconds. Yeah, go ahead.
You may see an uptick in second homes. That a second home, instead of primary, secondary, you may end up seeing, at least for the more affluent, you may see sort of co-primary, where you maybe don't trade up on the traditional primary, but you invest in a larger second home in the outlying regions.
Right.
Tremendous amount of inquiries about that right now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. John, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate your insight. You are really the go-to person when it comes to talking about New York City real estate. Jonathan Miller, President and CEO of Miller Samuel, on the phone from Connecticut. All right, let's get a check on world and national news headlines. Back over to Bob Moon we go. Hey, Bob.
Carol, ahead of the Memorial Day weekend, President Trump is picking a fight with some states and their authority to limit gatherings to fight the coronavirus. Trump essentially says he'll be a higher authority as the faithful appeal to their higher authority.
Today I'm identifying houses of worship, churches, synagogue, and mosques as essential places that provide essential services.
Making the terse announcement at the White House, Trump took aim at governors who he says have wrongly barred religious gatherings and vowed if they don't abide by his request, he will, his word, override them. It's the balance between freedom and public health that will be tested at the traditional start of the summer season, Bloomberg's Martin DeCaro reports.
After 2 quiet months, travel and tourism-reliant businesses are eyeing this weekend as the start of what's expected to be a slow recovery. That's if the act of fleeing home isolation for beaches and restaurants doesn't spread the pathogen anew. Well, it doesn't have to lead to disaster, says the nation's top infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Wear a mask, stay 6 feet away from anyone so you have the physical distancing, and go out. Go for a run. Go for a walk.
Memorial Day travel is still expected to be a fraction of previous years. The U.S. Travel Association forecasts consumers will spend just a third of last year's level. In Washington, Martin DeCaro, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Bob Moon.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. The university helped biomedical engineering professor Tara Alvarez launch a startup that may revolutionize vision therapy.
Our startup through NJIT is called Ocular Motor Technology. We create virtual reality vision therapy in a head-mounted display. So it's gaming, and basically we're sugarcoating the therapy so that children and young adolescents don't even realize they're doing therapy. To accomplish this, we need biomedical engineers, which are here on NJIT campus, computer scientists, artists, people that are into story development, and then we're collaborating with a lot of the large pediatric medical centers. This idea of a startup culture is extremely important to not just NJIT and the National Science Foundation, but also to the U.S. as a societal whole.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
This is a message from the government. There is new guidance to help businesses and employees who cannot work from home be COVID-19 secure at work. The advice will help you conduct a risk assessment, put social distancing measures in place, improve hygiene and cleaning in the workplace, and look after the well-being of your employees. Every workplace is different. Use the guidance to make your business COVID-19 secure. Access the support you need at gov.uk/working safely. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike. Just to go over the first couple of picks, Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
He does! Fabry wins it!
To standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn. Are you ready for the realest first-hand take of what's happening in the NBA? On their podcast, All the Smoke, former NBA players Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson bring their fiery intensity to the mic, dishing on the latest news and drama from on and off the court without boundaries.
Half man, half amazing. My friend, our brother, Vince Carter, man. Welcome to the show.
Yo, what's up, man? What's up, my brother? Man,
Search All the Smoke on TuneIn to listen.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind, giving up. I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic Game Replays to start listening.
Today at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. An up Friday, at least for the S&P and NASDAQ. A down day for the Dow. The Dow dropped 9 points, down less than 0.1%. S&P up 6, higher by 0.2. NASDAQ up 39. That was a gain of 0.4%. Stocks did rally into the close of trading after whipsawing investors during a volatile week that featured optimism over the reopening of the economy and a renewal of trade tensions. For the week, the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advanced. The 10-year, the yield there, 0.65%, up 4/30 seconds. Gold up 0.5%, $17.35 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude down 1.3%, $33.47 a barrel. Important headline for homebound gamers. Microsoft says it is working on a fix for Xbox Live service outages. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie. Well, one of the most read stories on the Bloomberg, and Carol, something that certainly caught both of our attention earlier, is all about how we get back. I mean, how much have we talked about how we get back? I mean, it's all anybody's talking about.
It's all we talk about.
To some extent. But one of the best stories, truly, that I've read about this, it's on the Bloomberg today, and as I said, it's one of the most read for a reason. Olivia Carville was one of the writers on it, and I'm going to read the headline. Ecstatic and terrified, Americans are rushing out of their homes. It's a holiday weekend. We're all thinking about what we're going to do. Olivia joins us on the phone from Bloomberg, and I have to say, she has done some phenomenal work over the course of this, reporting about New York City, which obviously has been the epicenter. So this is a really nice kind of signature piece on everything that's going on. Olivia, it's really nice to have you with us, and eager to hear, what you found and what really informed your reporting here.
Well, thanks, Jason. It's great to be on. I found this story really interesting to report out, mainly because it was the first time I was actually able to leave my apartment and go and speak to people outside my home. I headed out into the park on Tuesday just to ask people how they were feeling about lockdown, how they were feeling about quarantine fatigue, and then also to head into some small businesses that were reopening in my neighborhood of Harlem to see how the workers, those people who are going to be facing customers for the first time in months, were feeling about returning back. And what I got was something really some mixed emotions, and it really highlighted the difficulties here. I feel like we're in a social distancing dance, and there are some unwilling participants and some really eager to hit the dance floor. So some of the people I talked to in the park on Tuesday said things like, Americans aren't used to being told what to do, particularly New Yorkers. They want to get their lives back. They feel like they've been locked up for long enough. They're watching those death rates dwindle. They're ready to get back out into the warm weather. And then I headed inside some of these small businesses like a Subway chain, a bar, and a dry cleaners that had reopened for the first time in 2 months. And what I heard from the workers is that they're actually afraid to be there. They feel like customers are getting more and more relaxed with using face masks and gloves, and they're crowding into the shops. And these people are heading home to their own families and have a fear that they're going to bring a virus back. One of the guys I talked to inside a dry cleaner shop just down the road from where I live said he's actually shifted into the basement because he lives at home with 2 young daughters, his wife and his mother who has asthma. And he's really afraid of handling people's clothes and their credit cards. And said at one point he had 3 or 4 people inside a store, which is pretty small. Yeah. And so he's moved into the basement and is taking dinner from the back patio because he's not even walking inside his house anymore. So we're getting kind of this really different opinion from those who want to open and those who don't.
Yeah, it's interesting, too. I think about that going back eventually to work, and if we're commuting, do I then come home and quarantine myself from my family to some extent? Because you just don't know. It's interesting, too, Olivia, and you write about this in your story about how initially, people were coming into some of these small businesses and everybody had a mask on, right? They understood it. And now people are starting to back off of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we talked to one woman who works inside a restaurant who said at the peak of all this, 90% and more people were coming in with face masks, and now she's saying less than 25% of customers are wearing them. Wow. And I feel like lots of different places are dealing with it in different ways because obviously across the states, they've only been given guidelines. There's no strict rules around how to reopen and what the requirements are. So some cafes are actually taking the temperature of customers before they come inside. Others are allowing them in without a face mask. Some are only letting employees come back to work who have taken the antibody test and can prove they're negative. There's a total kind of patchwork quilt of what's going on across the country right now as all these states try to start reopening.
You highlight, actually, I live in Jersey City, downtown Jersey City, and you highlight the pet shop, vegetarian restaurant, and bar. I mean, they're not far. I usually pass them, walking on my way home, and it's a whole restaurant row, and it's this wonderful community where the street has been, shut off so there's no traffic, and we've been doing this for years, but it's lots of restaurants. But I do wonder, how do they come back? And part of the problem is, what are the rules? I mean, they talk about, a bartender. Do you have to change gloves every time you serve a drink? I mean, that's like, you got to figure this out, right? And there's not really, I feel like, conformity among rules and regulations right now.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of confusion out there as well. Like, what can we do? What can't we do? Just this past weekend, I was down in Washington Square Park, and there were dozens of sunbathers out there without face masks on. There were people ordering cocktails on the streets without face masks on. And then on the flip side of that, you talk to some people who haven't left their home for over 2 months.
Right.
So I feel like there's like a really big differences between how people are responding to this.
Well, and Olivia, before we let you go, I mean, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, as you say, you've been working from home, you hadn't ventured out. It's not a natural state for a reporter to sort of be so confined. But I also wonder, especially since we have a listenership that is across the country, nay, the world, listening to this. And I think for a lot of people who aren't in New York City, there's this sense of like, if I'm in Dallas or in Atlanta, like it looks a little bit different, but maybe not so much. But New York City is radically different, just even to the naked eye. Like, paint us a picture if you can.
Right. Well, I'm from New Zealand, and I have a lot of family members back home who have been calling me asking that exact question. New York's a hot spot.
Yeah.
What's going on there? What does it look like outside? I think for me, and it's hard to complain because my job hasn't been affected. I live in an apartment up in Harlem, and I've largely been okay. But one of the things that was particularly unsettling in the real thick of it was the ambulance sirens. I live near a hospital, and just all through the night you would hear ambulance sirens as they were picking up people across the city. And I found that quite difficult, just thinking about like every time something goes past, it's another person crashing. And I was reporting a lot on the front lines in the early weeks of the crisis, and it was pretty harrowing interviewing some of the frontline workers. One of the most disturbing interviews I did, which has really stayed with me, was with a nurse who was down in Brooklyn, and she works in the ICU, and she was saying that never in her life has she had to witness someone dying in a room alone, and that, to enter the rooms of some of these patients, they were in negative pressure rooms, so you'd have to get the full equipment on, the PPE gear, the masks, the gloves, the face shields, the booties, the hats. So it took minutes to even be able to go into the room, and then you were trying to limit the amount of time you were in there. But inside that room is a person, and it's someone who's lying there, and they're afraid, and they can't reach their family. And she said that at one point she was looking through the window into one of these rooms, and she saw one of her colleagues just sitting on the side of the bed, all gloved up, holding the hand of a woman who was dying, and she had the family on her phone, on FaceTime, so they could be there with her in those final moments. So it's pretty hard hearing stories like that.
Oh my God.
It's such a powerful body of work that you have produced, Olivia Carville, and a reminder that this is ultimately a health crisis. As much as we want to get out, underneath it all is that. Olivia Carville, one of our top reporters here in New York City. Tremendous work. Congratulations. Thank you. This is Bloomberg.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind, giving up. I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier. That also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn. Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
Round the Bases with the StatCast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Behind the highlight reels, championship rings, and colossal paychecks, there are sports stories that fuel, deepen, and even challenge our love for the game. For true tales of underdogs, anti-heroes, and game-changing innovators, explore a sports documentary on TuneIn, like Sports Wars, telling the origin stories of classic rivalries, Raise Sports, about the concussion crisis that threatens football's future, and Dunkumentaries, a podcast devoted to the beauty and power of the slam dunk. For these and more, search sports documentaries on TuneIn.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Mixed Friday.